7:03 p.m. on Monday, March 31st, and I would call this meeting of the Waterbury Select Board to order. Thank you everyone for your patience. We had a board of abatement right before this, which went a little over. Our first item on the agenda for this evening is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
Approve the agenda is written.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, agenda is approved as presented. There are printed copies up here in the front along with supporting materials, and it's also on the website. Next up is the consent agenda items. We have 3 items to approve the meeting minutes of our last regular select board meeting on March 17th, to approve a first-class restaurant bar license for Fruit Brewery, and to approve a tobacco and tobacco substitute endorsement for Charismatic LLC. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I make the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any clarifying questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. That brings us to public a minute early. The public portion of the agenda is to address the board for anything that's not already on the printed agenda. So we do have Blush Hill Road and Vermont Route 100 intersection and a number of other topics. So if you're here for those, we will have set comment time for that. But anyone else would like to address the board, now is the time. We ask you to come up to the table so folks online can hear, and then you limit yourself to 3 minutes. If we need more discussion, happy to add you to a future select board agenda. Anyone who would like to speak on public forum?
First thing I'd ask is,
Will you just say your name just so
Oh,
everyone else
all right.
does too? Thank you.
name old Christians. Were any of the select board meetings at last Monday's meeting over, how would be there? Basically there.
I had a work commitment.
Well, just asking, so I don't sound redundant here. So I attended that meeting. It was a 2-hour meeting, a fair amount of input. I did get up and speak, and after witnessing what had gone on there for a while, first question I asked aloud to the public for the legislators' knowledge was how many people that were there attending that meeting were in the education industry or had been in the education industry, and well over half raised their hand, and there was probably, I guess, 100, at least 100 people there. Second question I asked was, how many in the room had realistic expectations that they were going to be able to retire and stay in Vermont for the rest of their life? I'll bet probably 10 raised their hand. That'll give you a good perception of people's expectations was, you know, the cost of affordability in this state and where we're headed. My takeaway from the meeting, and I was looking for something positive. The new Secretary of Education was there. She tried to explain a lot of the concept of the administration's new proposal. My takeaway, trying to be open-minded, was that there is no answer. They don't have any solutions. House Ways and Means Committee today brought up discussion about, which is a little concerning to me, taking our property taxes, possibly dividing them in 9 different segments. That worries me, and of course, there's information about the new administration's potential cuts to the state, which are long overdue, and how that might affect the budget process and the spending, which will in turn affect school education as well, on the state house. So just a quick overview. Thought it was worth going to.
Thanks, Chris. Any other folks for public comment? Again, 3 minutes, and just ask that you state your name to start.
Kelly Lake. Hi. I was gonna ask why Tom's lights, is that correct? I didn't notice your name on the town board. Everybody else has their name in their email, but his isn't on it, and I was wondering if it can be added.
Yeah, I think Tom's email you find under the staff section, because we are all elected select board members.
Okay.
Tom is the municipal manager, so
Okay.
he's a paid staff person.
Okay.
And let me just, you know, I love checking the website, so at the very top, if you go to contacts.
Yes.
Tom Lights and his email are listed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions, Mike?
Yes. This is maybe on a lighter note. I just want to put on the record a big congratulations to Jack Donovan, who is retiring from WDEB. He worked in radio for 52 years and at WDEB 31 years. He's kind of a real community asset. Gonna miss him on music to go to the dump by every Saturday morning, and just wanted to put that in our record. A big congratulations to Jack and everything that he's done for the community, especially he was always there for whenever we had a flood, been on the radio, letting people know what's happening. And I think we'll all miss it. Thank you.
Other folks who would like to speak on public comment? All right, two additional announcements I would make is that the planning commission has a visioning session this Wednesday, April 2nd, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Grange Hall Cultural Center. They've been doing a series of these as part of the town plan update. So if folks are able to attend, would encourage you to do so. And then I would also note this is the last select board meeting to begin at 7 p.m. for the foreseeable future. When we set our regular meeting dates for the year, the rest of the meetings for the year will be beginning at 6:30 p.m. on the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Mondays of the month. That's our standing meeting time. We may have additional special meetings, but again, if you want to be here for the very beginning next time, it will be at 6:30 p.m. All right. With that, we'll move on to our next agenda item. So this is the Flush Hill Road and Vermont Route 100 intersection. I'll give just a little framing to start, which is to say, if you've been on the Waterbury Front Porch Forum, probably 2 weeks ago, there's been a fair amount of chatter about this particular intersection. We have 15 minutes on the agenda tonight, and I think two main goals. I'm going to turn it over to Tom Lights, our town manager, to give a little background overview and information sharing about the intersection, and then certainly would welcome comments and questions from the public. I don't anticipate that we're going to have definitive decisions or updates tonight. I do know that we have state police on our agenda later tonight if they're able to attend, but again, the goal of this agenda item is to do some basic information sharing, input gathering from all of you, and we anticipate we likely will need to revisit this. We're meeting again next Monday in terms of next step action planning. So Tom, I would turn it over to you for kind of basic background orientation, and can you just make sure to admit Mallory into the Zoom sticks?
So we put on the website, our nice redesigned website, related files. Some information about a study that was done in 2017. Pull it up here. About this very issue that was raised in Concord, was looked at now about 8 years ago. A couple of real relevant pieces I just want to give as an overview. Let me go down to page 15, which shows some. So it may be a little hard to see, but one of the preferred alternatives of the study was to essentially build sidewalks from the end of the bridge on So Street to Shaw's. And that's something that I think was talked about on Front Porch Forum. That alternative and that project in 2017 is on page 30 of this report. And on page 30, in 2017, that was a $600,000 project, which was the estimate. The reasons for that is if you simply look at that area, there is no shoulder to the road, it's a real steep embankment. And so they essentially had to highly engineer some sort of cantilevered sidewalk system to make that work. I would also note that since then, the 2024 storm caused us about $400,000 in damages, specifically along Thatcher Brook. And that was simply portions of the roadway, the edge of the roadway that slid off into the stream, so we had to stabilize the bank. And not being an engineer, but I look at this section of bank, which is awfully steep, and it looks to me like you might engineer it a little bit differently, knowing what happened in the last year with the storm. Applying construction inflation since 2017, I would dare say that this is now $1 million project if it can be done as envisioned. Now, that is merely a sidewalk from the end of the Stowe Street Bridge to the light of Shaw's. It is nothing across the road, and across the road is substantially more expensive. The Agency of Transportation does not have any desire to allow for flashing crosswalks on a state road, but there's not a sidewalk connecting both sides. So that's one difficulty. The other difficulty identified in this study is that there are no sidewalks on that Flush Hill Road, and if there were, I want to make sure I get people in. Do this one.
To just say the unit.
There we go. So if there were sidewalks on Blush Hill Road, we don't believe our sidewalk plow can get to them just because of the steepness of the road, and so. Nothing is impossible, but this area presents all sorts of complex engineering challenges. The study in 2015 actually went further. And went up Shaw Driveway to Mill Road as another alternative, which again was a very expensive alternative, and so. I think we heard from the community that like this issue looked at, and we can look at it, but I wanna. Just brace people to say that any improvements in this area, one. Are very difficult because it's not our road, two are very difficult because of topography. So we should assume there's a very high price tag for anything here. The other piece I want to make is the town actually has some grant funds available for this. So the town in 2021 won a planning grant for about $225,000. We did not spend much of it. So as of today, we have about $214,000 available for engineering, and so we can study this issue. And refresh the numbers and try to look at other alternatives, but. Again, I want to brace everyone that this is a any project undertaken here is well into the 7 figures for a pretty short amount of sidewalks, and it presents challenges for maintenance, all sorts of engineering challenges. So again, I just want to let people know this is not an easy thing to accomplish, despite the funds that we have available. Is that a good way to frame it?
Yeah, I think that's great. If you want to stop sharing, I'm seeing that screen. So just to emphasize, I think I want to name, I know there was a lot of concerns specifically around motor vehicles. So Tom is not talking about that. We know it's not just pedestrian, but we wanted folks to be aware that I think the first select board meeting I sat in as a guest in 2017 was when they were approving that final study. So again, clearly it's been a long-standing concern in the community. We wanted folks to be aware of this study, that there has been some consideration, as Tom just outlined. Tom, I guess also just to outline, it is a state highway, so that we would need to coordinate things with them. But I think I'll pause kind of our upfront information down here to invite folks if they would like to come with specific questions, comments, or concerns, so that we can gather that now. Is there anyone who wants to speak on this? And do you want to, Tom had one more.
I just said one thing, so. Tentatively on May 5th, the state will be at a select board meeting. We're planning to have it at the fire station because they're giving an overview of the Stowe Street Bridge project. That project will begin before the end of May. That bridge will be out for the entire summer. I think tentatively completed in September, early October. The new bridge will have sidewalks. So that will help this issue a little bit, but nonetheless, if you simply drive that road, you can see it's an awful challenge putting sidewalks there. So May 5th, we'll get a little more information, and that project is of some improvements.
Yes, please come on. Yeah, if you, it's mostly so everyone knows this. Owl in the middle is recording the Zoom. Tom, if you want to admit some, John, and then make me a co-host, I can help you admit people. And if you want to say your name, that way folks online can hear you.
So I'm Susan Hanson. I live on Blush Hill. And that intersection is terrifying. And so I'm talking about the motor vehicle piece. And in my opinion, no one should even try to walk anywhere near the intersection. But the problem is if you're coming down Blush Hill or you're coming up Stowe Street, the timing of the light is so, I know they're trying to move highway 100 traffic, but you will oftentimes have no time to cross the intersection. And there are some elements that influence that. If people are coming, mostly it's red light runners, but if people are coming down Highway 100 and want to turn on to Stowe Street, they come real far forward and then they line up. People who are coming up Highway 100 and they may want to turn up Blush Hill, they kind of way forward in there into the light and then they line up. So now I'm coming down Blush Hill and I get a green light and the intersection is full of these cars going this way and going that way, and there's no possibility that I can cross without somebody also wanting to be in the same space. So that's one of the issues. One of the other issues is that coming across the intersection, there's not necessarily the right of way given. So people who are coming up Stowe Street may just turn right in front of you and go on their merry way, whereas you are intending to go across. I don't know if there are pavement marking or some kind of signage, but it's a dangerous intersection. And there's really going to be a very tragic accident there in just a matter of time. I don't need to be over dramatic, but what really got me on my soapbox this time was we've had multiple, I both lay on my horn as somebody goes flying by, but I went down the hill, almost got hit. I came up to the intersection and almost got hit. And I came into the house and said, that's it. But, so I don't know, I know it's a state highway, but there's something that needs to be adjusted in terms of the timing of the lights, the pavement markings, the lane markings. The other problem is that as you're sitting to cross the intersection, all of a sudden there's traffic coming out of the hotel that's all of a sudden over here on your right. And so you have two people entering the intersection. It's just very confusing. So anything that can be done to make it better would be really, really helpful. And I couldn't stay silent anymore, so thank you for listening. And as you may have noticed, there have been multiple people that have chimed in and expressed a similar experience at the intersection. And just today, someone said to me, "What happened?" Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Other folks who would like to speak, yes,
That was a good segue.
and will you just say your name too? I know many of you folks, it's again just for everyone.
My name's Al Lewis. I lived up on Curry Hill. I've lived up on Curry Hill 50 years. So I've gone through this intersection thousands of times. But I'm sure the residents who are on Curry Hill, Blush Hill, and anybody that's coming down through that area have to go through this intersection. Experience the same thing that you're seeing on Front Porch Forum and what we've expressed over the years. Back when the Route 100 project was done from Stowe to from Waterbury to Stowe, I met with Bill Woodruff and we went over the possibility of just restriping the existing paving on Blush Hill and also Route 100 as it passes through Route 100. And we did talk about adding another lane, which the new bridge project will be doing. So part of that, they recognized this as okay, but the state highway said, we can't do it now because we're under contract, we need to finish the contract and we're running behind. We don't want to address it, so they restriped everything just the way it was before. So picture's worth 1,000 words, I think. So I went on Google Earth, and I took some pictures. One of these pictures shows the traffic coming from the north, going past Blush Hill and going toward Waterbury.
brought that picture up because it shows a car right in the intersection, as Sue explained, is waiting for the traffic light to change, but it's right in the intersection. And I apologize. They're also here. I'm gonna leave this with the Tom, I'll do this. So that shows one example, and that just happened to be when they were doing the GPS videos and creating slides and whatnot for people to see what it looks like from the ground. So I just happened to capture that. The one heading from the north to the south into Waterbury itself, it also shows the distance that traffic lane is where cars travel and the cars that stop to turn on Bush Hill. There's about 6, maybe 8, maybe even more than that distance between the truck that's there and the car, and that's the lane that you can travel in. On the right-hand side of that lane, there's plenty of pavement. And so what I've shown on the drawing, this is a sketch, and I took the sketch from the actual drawings that the State Highway Department prepared. And with the sketch, it shows adding a lane, which would be coming from the south, going north toward Stowe, but allowing people to turn to the right onto Stowe Street. Another lane going straight, and then a lane going on Bush Hill. Those are each 11-foot lanes, and there's 2 foot at least on either side, and there's plenty of pavement to do that with just restriping the road there. Coming down on Bush Hill, also, there's a picture on the other side here. I'm not sure whether or not. There's a picture that shows Bush Hill, and you can see how wide Bush Hill pavement is at the bottom. There's plenty of room there. Put another lane to turn to the left to go to the north, and I think that would alleviate some of the problem with people who are waiting behind the car that wants to turn, watching the light, knowing they've got a short time to get through. Once that car moves far enough forward, people start to go past that car, and traffic is turning from Stowe Street, trying to go south, and all of a sudden you've got an intersection condition. So this is not a situation that all the residents experience because they don't all go through this particular intersection. All of those residents that are living in this area and people who are coming from downtown on Stowe Street, getting onto Route 100, experience the same thing. So I'm presenting this. I went over this with Bill Woodruff. I don't know what time it was some years ago. And he's aware of it. And I just think if work could be done to have the AOT restripe the roadway, they can go out there and take the measurements and draw it up on different plans and whatnot. But I assure you, it fits. And if they could do that, it's going to alleviate a problem that's existing right now. There are some stop bars that if they're set back, that'll allow the curvature for buses to go around or somebody with a trailer on their vehicle. I mean, all of that can be part of the technical plans.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate. Is
But
there?
this is- I'm gonna
I
leave
wanted
this
to.
with you.
Wonderful. Oh, perfect. I tried to take a picture if you didn't see that. Anything else? I want to just make sure if there's other folks here who want to add.
Any
Thank you very
questions?
much.
I've got.
I do have one question, I'm sorry.
A question for Al. I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask if you wouldn't mind stepping out into the hallway, just so that I see Bill Sheplik also has a comment, mostly so we can keep our time going, if that's okay, or is it about this?
It is about this.
All right, go ahead.
Um,
Come on up, because I'm making everyone else do it. See, this is the thing, folks. I run the meeting and then I have to be fair and consistent to everyone, so yes.
So, hi, Amanda McKay. Al, do your calculations for the painting of the streets take into any space for pedestrian use? But for pedestrian use, walkers, bikers, any shoulder use?
The shoulder that's available right now, the way it's planned, I think it's a 2 or 3 foot shoulder. And so,
So this
moving-
would, that 2 to 3 foot shoulder?
yes, it would move. Those here, it would move. These stripes would go this way and take up this space, which you see here.
Yeah,
Okay, so everything would shift this way and then provide space. If there's gonna be pavement area for people riding the bike, that would provide that. And it could be coordinated with the Stowe Street bridge project so that the curvature where the guardrail is can be such a radius that it allows for a smooth transition along that corner, but it would relieve the traffic who's trying to turn right onto Snow Street and not back it up over the interstate.
Thanks, Al, thanks Amanda for the follow-up. Do you want to say hi and do you mind moving the visual aid so I can make eye contact? Thank you. Hi.
I'm Bill Shepard. The 2017 study was probably the third one that was done since 1988, and I think, Tom pointed out quite well, I'm Bill Shepard, by the way. You know, the cost for the pedestrian, sidewalks and crosswalks and everything else is very much prohibitive. And state doesn't have a lot of money to do that. We went through all the same concerns with regard to the sidewalk plow. People are going to expect that town's going to take care of that in the winter. But all that being said, I want to just talk a little bit about one of the issues that Mrs. Johansson talked about. And I think there may be a simple solution in terms of traffic trying to go up, you know, up Blush Hill from Stowe Street and people crossing and who gets to go first and everything else. And also they can deal with the left-hand turns, and it requires there to be a little bit longer red lights maybe. And I know especially in the fall and on winter weekends when people are trying to get out of Stowe after skiing, trying to keep the traffic moving on 100 is critical. But if you had the green light on Route 100, when it turns red, keep a red light on Stowe Street and have a green light off of Blush Hill and let those people go while nobody's moving off of Stowe Street. And then put the red light on Blush Hill and give a green light to Stowe Street. So you can keep a green light on Route 100 and have a red light on Stowe and Blush Hill that are not simultaneous. And that would alleviate a lot of the issues with the crossing traffic. And then the same thing with the left-hand turn. The reason why people move into the middle of that intersection to turn left is because the red arrow turns yellow and blinks. And people say, oh, well, that means I'm gonna be able to go. So they move out there and the traffic coming up from the interstate or from the village is too much. And they never can go and 3 or 4 cars are out there. So if you kept the red light, the left arrow red on Route 100 coming from Stowe to go on to Stowe Street, kept it red until you were gonna have a green light and don't bother with that yellow light, that would solve a lot of those. So I think the state can work with the traffic signals to alleviate a lot of the concerns that the Johanssons have with regard to turning traffic. And Al's idea, you know, that's at least the third time I've seen that idea. I think that there's merit to it, restriping, but I think for the traffic that we've been concerned about, just adjusting those lights and not having simultaneous greens on Blush Hill and Stowe and keeping that arrow red on the south will help. Thank you.
Any other folks? I'm gonna see if there's anyone else who hasn't gotten to speak yet. Anyone else to speak on this? Did you have a quick follow
I
up?
just had a quick comment to make about the red light runners.
Yeah.
There's just a red light runner all the time. And I was just in Pennsylvania where there was the side of the road between Philadelphia and the Delaware border that I was headed to. There was a yellow sign with these big blinking lights around it, and it crossed my mind as I saw it. We need one of those signs that says dangerous intersection ahead, slow down. But that's a problem. There's a lot of red light runners that come to that intersection, they see that the light's about to change, and then it changes before they get to the bottom of the hill and right in front of them.
Thank you. All right, we have our next presenter here, so I think we're gonna move on to the next one. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight and offering all this comment. As I mentioned, we have another meeting on 4/7, so if we can get answers by then, and as Tom also shared on May 7th, we'll be doing a much deeper dive with V-Trans about this intersection, but hope to have more clarity prior to that.
Can I ask one question? What's the width of the new bridge? Is that gonna be wide enough? Or, you know,
I don't recall offhand, it does have a third lane, we're turning. On one, I don't know offhand, but that's, the full presentation is May 5th, and the state should be here to make that.
okay.
Thanks, folks. I'm gonna move us on to our next item, which is a Conservation Commission update. I know our Conservation Commission Chair, Amy Marshall Carney, is here, and Amy, if you want to point out, I know a number of your other members, I think, are joining both in person and online. By way of introduction, I would just say you all and your commission have been doing great ongoing work, and this is part of our practice of hoping to build more connections between the select board and commission. So excited to hear. I know you prepared a presentation that Tom or I can screen share, just let us know
That'd be great.
whenever it's set.
Yeah, so Marty is the Conservation Commission Chair member, and then we've got Josh Lincoln on as well as, I thought I saw Marcy there, but she might have, oh, there she is, Marcy's on as well. So thanks for this opportunity. I'm gonna try to be really quick with this. The material's out, but please stop me and ask questions as we need to. Just thought it might be helpful, if you could do that one, yeah, thank you. That'd be helpful just to say where have we been and what have we got headed, where are we headed? So starting off, it says the 2024-25 plan does bleed into 2026 a little bit because some of our work products will be associated with the municipal plan. The first one here is just, yeah, thank you. That slide represents when I first joined, and Billy's on as well, he was chair at the time. We were given some kind of insights into, hey, here's some areas to focus on. Those four, as you see here, really looking at that ecological and functionality and habitat values of the Shutesville Hill Wildlife Corridor as well as Worcester Range. Updating existing data, analyses, reports, and things of that nature relative to that area as well as the Worcester Range, which that's a very large area, by the way. Both of them are. Proposed language, so this is as the planning commission is underway right now with the municipal plan. We've been doing some reviews there as well, but also to pull some information together to help out with the bylaw adjustments if needed. And then there was community value mapping activities that occurred that we wanted to integrate as we could. So taking that, we also then started, the next slide if you don't mind, reaching out to a lot of the stakeholders in this space. So you can imagine you've got wildlife, you've got the watershed, the water wetlands, you've got DEC, lots and lots of partners. And we started to say, okay, what do we do? And so there's actually some pretty good literature out there. This particular one is, community strategy. So at that local level, helping us say, okay, well, how do we take all this stuff and bring that to practice where it makes sense? And so I just wanted to share that here. I don't need to belabor this, but it's really 3 simple steps that we took and heeded that for guidance, and which is gonna we'll thread over to 2025 when I get there. This is a great resource if folks have not seen it. It's out there both in the digital space, and you can get it in terms of printed copy as well. But it helps us get clarified what we're trying to do. So the next slide just reminds folks, we visited our mission statement in the spring, about a year ago, so spring of 2024, really honed that there. It had, I think, more scope than we could actually live up to. So we didn't want to put that out there without being really clear about what we could manage within the commission and then the key stakeholder groups. The 2024 year in review, again, I'm not going to belabor this, it's in the annual report. So you can read that, but there's some highlights that I think were worth at the highest level. We really focused on engaging the community as best we could. As we ramped up our participation on the commission, there were some riparian work in the Thatcher Brook area. We heard Thatcher Brook earlier relative to floods, so we're paying a pretty clear focus on water and where it's coming from and where it's headed. There was some invasive species work as well. And then the research and data collection is, there's a lot, relative to the municipal plan work and maps, as well as water quality monitoring. That's a long-standing practice here in the town of Waterbury. We are just starting to better understand how we can be helpful there in addition to the sampling. And then last call out here is the invasive species pieces. And so, but particularly in parcels that the town owns or EFOD owns, but also, you know, trying to, as we go into 2025, be more helpful to community members and let them know about those items as well. The next slide, and again, there's more there, but you can read that in the report. The next slide kind of just addresses our objectives. So this year, we took an approach, which is strategic objectives, goals, priorities. We also have a tactical plan, and then our plan is to put some measures in place with guidance and input from others. So obviously, these should be fairly obvious and consistent with prior years. Iteratively, you know, the annual conservation priorities. This is an opportunity here where this board can take a peek at them, provide guidance. We share them also with the planning commission. We'll be soliciting input there as well. And then as time goes on, we really want to make sure that we can integrate with all the other commissions relative to this work. So recreation, tree, there's other areas of our space we're not there yet. We want to be able to be well positioned to provide those recommendations to we're in the auspices of both planning commission and the select board. Of course, share with other stakeholders as needed, but that's our main objective here. We want to promote, so we're going to be putting a very heavy focus as much as we can on communications and outreach. We're starting to get some legs on that as well. And then also advise on any conservation related projects or projects that interact or intertwine, I should say, with conservation related priorities. And then the last, partnerships. So we've already got several at this point. An example would be the Shutesville Hill Wildlife Partnership, which includes stakeholders like Town of Stowe Planning Commission, their Conservation Commission, Fish and Wildlife, Nature Conservancy, State Connected Initiatives, Stowe Land Trust, and the Market Trust. One major relationship that's been cultivated and nurtured for many years, and now we're continuing to manage that. And then we also want to make sure that we're tapping into the place of the questions. I'll go to the next one. And this document is in more of a Google Doc form that will also be available for what's but for 2025-26, we kind of try to create a few buckets. And again, we are a full-fledged commission of 9, which is very exciting, diverse skill sets across the board. And we're all trying to find our place and where we can and can't offer our time. So the 4 key areas are budgeting and funding. We know that there's a lot of grant opportunities out there we want to secure if we can. And then or localized funding. Mapping and surveying is one of our statutory requirements to offer that information up to the town. Community outreach and engagement, we want people involved, we want people informed. So an opportunity like this also is one chance to share what we're doing. And then, as I mentioned, partnerships. So this particular space is very integrated across a variety of different stakeholder groups. We want to make sure that we're tapped in, we know what's going on, where we can be helpful. I'll go back up to the top. So we had a goal, we have a very specific goal this year of raising $40,000 to appropriate for, there's definitely some educational pieces there, but the lion's share of that relates to a natural resources, natural communities inventory. And that's intended to be a major input for the municipal planning activities for 2026 and for the future. Mapping and surveying is, again, one of our primary areas, and again, one of our requirements. So we want to make sure that we conduct that wall piece, which has never been done here in the town of Waterbury before, at that level. But we want to make sure some of the maps, I kind of got a chuckle out of them, they're a little outdated in our municipal plan, a few decades or so. So we want to make sure we freshen some of those up where they make sense. We can pull that forward as well. And then another piece of mapping and surveying is, so we've been learning from some of our cohorts and other commissions that the lands that are owned by the town, or in our case, EFOD maybe, which I'm not sure, but they have land management plans and they're very clear, and then they can also get linkage and support from that's something that we want to be helpful with if we can. Community outreach and engagement, again, as I said, we've got one person on the team who's well versed in this space, and we're gonna leverage our skill sets where we can, but we really want to start to communicate more broadly. And get out there, social media, pick up where some of the other commission members had left off in the last approaches. So the next slide speaks about, we know all this is, we've got challenges, which will help us kind of hone our priorities as well. And the challenges that we're aware of are definitely flood resiliency and fundamentally speaking, water. I live up in the more northern part of our town. Water flows down, so we gotta be mindful of that and all the activities around that. Definitely, there's a bunch of statistics out there that the climate impacts are happening. How they're affecting us to be determined in many different ways. So we want to keep our pulse on that, understand where can we be helpful, where can we not, where can we be thinking there's funding. So we don't want to be taxing the local taxpayers necessarily when we have events, but are there other opportunities where philanthropic funding, for example, may be a very resourceful area for us to secure. There are some other the Association of Vermont Conservation Commission has smaller grants, like $700. That would be really helpful for communications, for example. So we just want to be very mindful of that and see where those opportunities are. And then, as I said before, community engagement is what we want, but as you folks know, and those in the planning commission, it's a really tricky wicket to get that engagement level, comparison to the 5,000 people we have in this town. So that, we're not immune to that either. We're trying to figure out what are the ways that we can do that as we think about, not only getting ourselves out there in those social or virtual media ways, but more in practice. And that's where some of our partners are being helpful, and or we're joining to have dual events and marketing across town lines, for example. And then the last slide I have for you today is what we've got coming up in April and May. So this is much more down at the on the ground level. So the tactical stuff we have planned, and we're resourcing accordingly for that work. And we plan to do this for every month. We're not beyond May yet. As we learn more about April and May, we'll inform June, July, and so forth. And then in communications, like for example, with Martha, she's already indicated there'd be a great opportunity, maybe if there's whatever's going on in the planning commission world with the municipal plan, we might be able to slide in activities that are helpful there. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question with the unfortunate cancellation of the Leap Energy Fair, which was, there's a really good place for you to get the word out to a lot of your programs. Do you have any sort of potential replacement for that?
Not for this year. That would be full rabbit to have.
Right, I'm not saying to have like your own fair or anything like that, but any other kind of events.
What we've actually talked about, and I think I've heard you folks talk about it once or twice too, community events. So, but I've been here for a while. Like a community-based barbecue that has a multitude of perhaps, and these are brainstorming ideas, so right off the cuff, but maybe thinking of like a vendor setup, but it would be like Conservation Commission, and it has some educational activities. We've been talking about if we can do a more in-person community outdoor event. Again, nothing that I have, none of us are feeling comfortable, we can pull off relatively. Yeah, no, I was an unfortunate miss. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, a couple. Can you educate me a little bit? What exactly are they looking for when they're doing natural resources and conservation?
Yeah, so with the current state work that the mapping that's out there, that's at the landscape level. And when they go down to the community level, it gets into ecosystem species, taking into consideration the basis of that landscape level. So it's taking it down to like site level specifics. They do use aerial photos and things of that nature, but then within that report, one of the most powerful things is it comes up and it helps inform, or they translate that information really to help us understand current and perhaps future state implications, particularly, it's coming to mind mostly for us right now is like wetlands. There are a lot of wetlands that are not mapped at all. Wetlands have a direct correlation to, you know, the fluidity and invade saves the impact, I should say, downstream. So that has been, that we know that's one of our major priorities to say, hey, can we get a better handle on that? There are habitat elements, so I think we're pretty well informed about the Shutesville Hill, for example, and there's been a fair bit of study there. But there may be other areas in our town that would need that same level of specificity of the species there. The proposal they provided from Arrowwood, which is our vendor, if you could take a peek at that, they have some pretty good bulleted examples. Like actually, I'm talking about bulleted examples of what you can expect out of that report.
Okay.
That whole-
Yes. And then just more of a general question, a couple of years ago, there was a proposal with Selectboard voted on to conserve some land, I think, for land and trust up on Wash Hill. Maybe.
I don't think that was a select.
I think it was, yeah, Waterbury Land Initiative owns the land now. My understanding was that the town was considered for ownership.
I guess my general question is, it seemed like. You know, in the early 2000s, we went through this real era where land trusts were well funded and a lot of land was put into trust in Vermont, and that seems to have come to a halt or at least dramatically slowed. Are there any conversations with land trusts about looking at parcels in Waterbury and adding parcels into trust, or is that?
I think it's an opportunity. My conversation with the Waterbury Land Initiative, so that particular parcel on Dusha was their first ever parcel. So I think they were really getting their infrastructure and operational things in here. If there's definitely funding challenges, we need to have that. I believe they're probably team right now, I think, but I have not revisited that discussion with them. I do have questions about that. What I've always found interesting is that like for Stowe Land Trust, for example, has a direct correlation and connection with the Planning Commission and Conservation. The Waterbury Land Initiative does not. So it has always seemed a little odd to me that it's been established for the purpose of town of Waterbury, but yet not directly correlated with the town of Waterbury. So I think it'd be worthwhile pursuing that, absolutely. And I know that it actually came up in one of the planning sessions. A lady was asking about an interest in land trust in Waterbury, and I was able to share that we have one. Just I don't think it's directly connected. Yeah, I think that would be definitely worthwhile pursuing.
Other questions from folks on the board?
It's also, I think that, and it's some conversation with the town about what properties like the candidates for being put into trust is really appropriate. The council on Wash Hill, we quite got involved in that. Because we had done a study and we thought worked with folks who had built the hotel there, there. And just before I left, we did some work to change the high pressure zone, and we were able to push more water up on Wash Hill. And there was a real opportunity to have some housing built in that property that actually is put into trust by this crosswalk, I believe it was. And, you know, that property was prime property that was, that could have been served by water system. The sewer system was right down the hill and you could sewer that on gravity. And, you know, we approached the owner of it, and at that point, she was really saying, well, no, I want to kind of preserve it in open space. And there's a place for preserving land, but in my opinion, when we have the Mount Angelo State Forest and the Putnam State Forest, and it's 40% of the land owner of that's already state forest and parks. I'm not sure how much more conservation we can do, especially in places where we can get water and sewer, which could offer higher density housing. It's just something that's very.
He's gonna repeat the question, but it went a little long. Do you have anything to say?
No, I don't, I think he's, yeah. The term conservation is broader than preserving in perpetuity. So I think understanding so when I hear you say that, I think I understand your intent, you're talking about locking land down so it can't be developed. Is that what I understand? Yeah. Okay, yeah, I understand that too.
Other board questions, Robert?
Yeah, Amy was just gonna mention that, Revitalizing Waterbury is hosting a, community workshop, on, it's called a, community volunteer fair on Saturday, May 17th at, Brookside Primary School from, 1 to 3. And, welcome if you have, this is specifically for organizations that are looking for more volunteer engagement.
Are you the appropriate person to follow with?
Yeah.
Okay. Will do, that sounds great.
Do you want to repeat the date again, Robert, for general consumption?
Saturday, May 17th, Brookside Primary School, 1 to 3. Set up is.
Thank you.
Other questions for Amy on the Conservation Commission? I guess I'll ask one myself and say, I know a big piece of your work, you've been great about attending our meetings and this thought about coordination, like what would that look like for you in an ideal world? Or how do we get from the place of you having really awesome maps to thinking about next level policy decisions for us as the select board? Just welcome any thought about that type of coordination.
But in terms of, so I'll divide it in two, I think if we were able to come in at these once a quarter, I think it'd be helpful, we would be meeting here to provide updates and status at a higher level, you know, all the details. We may not need to be that frequent, really depends on how much progress we're making fast or not. But in terms of the inputs for the municipal plan, so that's, once we understand the outputs of that report, for example, we'll, and I don't know Martha's process yet, so I know that we're gonna have to fold in how the planning commission is planning to gather inputs, translate that into usable documents. So my hope is that we'll be connected to the planning commission with, I'm just gonna give an example, like we're gonna have some artifacts and we're gonna say, hey, this is what the results are, and here's what we're being told by the consultants that this informs. Come in here, say, hey, this is what we've learned. I also think that where it's gonna really come down to decision making is going to be with that land use element, right? Like, so we're gonna have a lot of information, but then, and it's gonna suggest a lot of things. So there's a lot of other inputs, and then there's gonna have to be some processing and assessing that information, saying, well, what are we gonna do with that? That I don't know enough yet. There's Martha's process, we have to say how best we can set up that. I think it's important.
I guess during your presentation, you talked about the very cognizant of Thatcher Brook due to natural disasters, flooding. Do you think any of the data or proposed mapping you want to do would play into disaster preparedness?
I do think it'll help, again, but if you're thinking kind of back to if you're gonna think about wetlands, the surface waters, things of that nature, soil types, that's gonna be the parcels that will help inform, okay, so this is the landscape we're dealing with, and that's gonna hopefully inform how do you interact with that landscape.
Right.
So it's gonna take other stakeholders to be able to help translate that into those insights. That's my understanding. In terms of Thatcher Brook, what we've been most focused on now is the Friends of the Municipal conduct annualized water sampling. And we have water sample results. Marty actually is taking that up, and then we know we've got to interact with some folks here. And I think it's out testing, I believe, will be the one that's the tributaries waiting. That work is now we have these results, and what do we do with it? So increased phosphorus and increase right now. Well, you have all that runoff coming from higher levels. That's starting to really affect the water information. So I do think with the multitude of inputs we get from the different places, we'll be very well informed. It's gonna come down to who are the people that are responsible for the solutions. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Martha, have her-
Oh, Martha online, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, sorry I couldn't be there. I just want to respond to Amy's concern that she's not aware of the planning commission process. It's not my process, it's the planning commission process for updating the municipal plan. I just want to make sure anybody in the room, and Amy included, all of the process is posted on the town's website for the municipal plan and the phases. We have gone through the community assessment phase and we're in the visioning phase. So we're not quite halfway through, and there's going to be, we had to cancel one meeting last Saturday, but we are planning on adding more visioning sessions to offer opportunities for more to participate. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what the Planning Commission municipal plan update process is. Thanks.
Thank you, Martha.
Any other comments on that? Thank you very much, Amy, for coming in. Thanks to all the commission members for all of your work. And we'll see about quarterly updates. Noting our agenda is tight. All that being said, I will say, Tom, do you mind stopping the screen share? We are at 8 p.m. and I'm sad to report that I have to use the invited pending note next to state police. Tom, you've confirmed they can't come? Yes. Okay. So text from across the room is that Lieutenant White is unable to join us. We will continue to put that into the parking lot for the next meeting. I did hopefully do my homework and ask our next event permit approvals folks to come here at 8 just in case. So first up, we had Water Gravel Grinder, if you wouldn't mind coming up a little early. Thank you. It is the hot seat, and if you don't just mind saying hello and who you are, we have a copy of your proposal and safety plan that we provided. But just quick overview and process. I will take the shameless moment as chair to highlight that we have parade and event permit in the parking lot. Someday, I hope we have a different and more streamlined process for that, but in the interim, you're getting an approval from the board, so here we are.
Okay, my name is Dan Potter. I am the current president of the Waterbury Area Trails Alliance. I am here tonight to request event approval for the 2025 gravel grinder. This is our 17th annual gravel grinder. This year it'll be in Pilgrim Park, and we usually have between 300 and 400 riders that show up for the day. And we did provide a safety plan. It's more or less the exact same plan that we used last year, slightly updated. If there are any questions on that, I'm happy to field them. Or any questions on the event in general.
Questions from board members, Kate?
We've had concerns in the past 2 years, about cars following the riders, stuffing up traffic a little bit. Any precautions that you'll be taking this year?
Yeah, so we have heard those concerns, and what we've done is in our materials about the gravel grinder that we send the riders, we try to say, ride single file, don't ride two abreast so that cars can get around you. We have also ordered some signs and put them up in the last year or two that say the same thing. Those are really the educational steps we try to take to avoid that situation. So,
Other questions? Roger?
Are you gonna have notification in advance along the roadway so that residents will know to expect to see riders on the day of the event?
Yep, so notification, we usually put out on all of our social channels, notifications of the event that's coming up. That will often include a link to the route that's being provided. We also do have some signage that goes out. So in a few places along the route that says, event this week. And then the day before the event is when we really go out and put out all the specific terms and signals signage.
What?
I just want to thank Juan in your submission. It's probably what you've been to the well a number of times, but you've done a great job, and I think the information you provided. It's very helpful.
Thank you, glad to hear it.
Any other questions from folks?
Is it okay to, move to approve the event?
Absolutely. Second.
No, I think that was the motion, that was the second.
I'll move, I'll give Rick a second.
All right, so we had a motion by Roger and a second by Tori to approve the Wada gravel grinder for Sunday, May 4th. Any further discussion? Right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, we're all set. Thank you very much for coming in.
Of course, thank you, have a good evening.
Next on our event list would be Clyde Whittemore Liberty Opening Day Parade. Scott Culver is planning on being here, but he may have not be here by 8 p.m. I don't think we have printed materials. I think he indicated in his email to me he would provide them.
Probably copy.
He said, I will be attending around 8 p.m. and have copy. He is not present and we don't have materials. I think we'll continue on and can revisit if he returns. This now moves us far ahead of schedule to our next item, which was flood resilience updates, including Randall Meadow. I would turn it over to Tom, who has had an eventful past 2 weeks, including some legislative testimony.
Or why don't I bring up the, why don't I share the screen again? I'll just bring up a map, just to make it easy for folks.
Scott, you wanna come right up to the hot seat? Do you mind? I'm gonna tell Tom to stop screen sharing. The
That's
state police did sadly no show. So we are well ahead of our schedule, but I said you would be well prepared right around 8 with printed copies, and here you are.
Here I am. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So I'm gonna wow and amaze you again with my stick figure pictures and my Google Earth maps and all that good stuff. So this will be the third year in a row I've submitted the same ones, so they brought the parade, the Louis parade goes so well that I don't want to change anything outside of a few more volunteers for side roads and that type of thing, just to make sure we get everybody covered. So there's the photos of my safety plan for the parade. We want to do Saturday, May 10th for our parade, starting at noon time. We're gonna try to get away from the traditional first Saturday, with some back and it's Arena Day and everything else, and there's so many events going on, it's just, it'd be easier for us to try to capture after the fact. And we have a couple of teams going to the Valley for their opening day on the 3rd, so it's just more chaos than we wanted. So far this year for the Bike and Little League program, we got about 120 players, which is right on key from last year, which I think is absolutely awesome. The parade route will be identically this fall for some of you who haven't heard this before, so we try to do the parade open a day. It was tradition for years after it dropped off for a dozen or so, then COVID, so on and so forth. So we're just trying to rekindle this back into the town. So this will be year number 3. What we typically try to do is start them down here at the Dash Grove facility. And we line up about a half an hour before we actually get out into the road. I have 2 flatbeds from ENS Transport who follow behind as blocker vehicles, for the simple fact that I don't want anybody coming up behind at the same time and making sure we keep us, all the participants inside the parade as safe as possible. Every intersection from here to Park Row will have volunteers with vests, flags, the whole nine to keep everybody through. So what we do is we set the walker trucks, we bring the parade onto the road. VSP provides a front vehicle for us, so we have some lights at the same time. So lights in the rear, lights in the front, participants in the center. So we come out onto Main Street, headed down through. Typically it's about it's a half a mile walk, so it's about 20 minutes to get some of those little legs going down that far. Works out really well. Each street will be blocked off until we get to it. So for example, we come out into the road, we start heading down toward Lincoln Street, Municipal Street will be our first street that will have someone blocking traffic coming from the backside out. And then what we do as soon as we cross each intersection or each street, we let the volunteer go and then they follow behind the trail. So vehicles can still come north to south, following the trail behind the backer trucks. And if they do not want to wait or can't wait, then they can come up Union, up down through, right down Railroad, down in Pilgrim Park and fire out that direction. So essentially it's the same setup that we've done the last 3 years. I'm very confident that it works very well. And I'd like to submit it to the group again for a permit to do this parade again on May 10th.
Questions from the board?
For the third year in a row, I said I appreciate it. And I'm on maps. And I move to approve the permit.
Okay, motion by Kane, second by Tori to approve the parade on Saturday, May 10th at noon. Is there any further discussion or questions?
Quick questions about how many teams you did out of it from here?
Well, you all pages and 20 kids and then 16 that were actually people interested. So we end up with a major softball, minor softball, one major baseball, 2 minor baseball, 6 farm, 16. So about 20, which is great because 3 years ago when I took the program over, there was only 50 kids. Now we're up about 104 people in the last one with that. So we only grow, which is great. With all the sports and everything going on, and you know, 800 kids occupied and breaking graffiti is a great thing. So yes, so about 20 teams. The one thing I can tell you is that thank you for approving this, but I'm also gonna double up on the volunteers in the front of the lead car. The only problem I ever seem to have is people coming out of driveways, things like that are in between our lead intersections. So they're more than gracious. We're not moving that fast. We have plenty of lights, plenty of flare going on, so we can get them off to the side. But me as the one person doing it, trying to do both sides of the roads, it's doable. It's just, it'd be much safer if we do it the opposite direction. So I'll probably put 2 people out with the lead car instead of the one and keep myself there just to make sure everything's moving in an orderly fashion. When we get down to the end, we pull them into the parking lot down there on the state side, and then we just disperse from there. So like I said, 20 minutes, I think 25 is probably the max, but we'll be in the road from say noon to 12:30. But as long as things go, and it'll be rain or shine, so we're not gonna try to do a rain date or anything like that. It's like, if it's that bad, we can postpone the day before, because we'll know if we won't redo it. It's be just one of those things where we're just gonna take a shot at it. Won't be the first time we've been out there with an umbrella walking down the street. So. Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Just out of curiosity, has the Waterbury team ever been in the state championship game or?
I can remember Jacob Prout's team in 19, don't even ask me. I won't tell you what year. One time they took the districts and ended up in the state. So,
Great.
yeah. But like I said, I mean, you're competing with Burlingtons and Colchesters and Benningtons and South Burlington. So yeah, all I want them to do is learn some teamwork and some skills and some good sportsmanship and go out there and have a good time. And last year we got to play right into about the 20th of October, which is unheard of. We did a summer development program right after the end of the season, and we played right in the Columbus Day League. And they still wanted to play more, but weather was not going to allow it. So all good. Well, yeah, exactly.
Right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this or any other questions? Right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Right, you're all set. Thank you very much for coming in and coming right into the hot seat.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, well, we're thinking code. You haven't seen stick figures like that.
All right, now to resume Tom Lights' map displaying skills, so we will resume our next agenda item. Which is flood resilience updates, including Brando Meadow, which Tom was pulling up on the screen.
So just so people understand exactly what we're talking about, this is the parcel. So this does appear that there's a real fighting chance that this parcel will be transferred from the state to the town. The draft map would not include the full parcel, but would essentially include the center area, which is the cornfield. Obviously, we don't need to own State Drive, but even on the edge of State Drive, there's some stormwater outflows from the state office complex. They want to be able to maintain them. So the parcel, as envisioned, we would own is about 48 acres. Said a legislative committee meeting a few weeks ago, and the committees signaled that because this property has no development potential, it's in the special flood hazard area, so you can't really put anything on it. And they do have a lease with the farmer, but it's for a few $1,000s a year, and so they signified that they become comfortable transferring the property to the town, not selling it for fair market value. The other logic related to that is anything we do here for flood resilience will benefit the state office complex. So there's, I think, not a good logic for selling it to the town, but just for transferring it to the town. I had conversations with the state over the last 2 years about the silt buildup in the field and using FEMA funds to remove the silt because that is an eligible FEMA cost. And in fact, the town had some silt removal on its own playing fields that was reimbursed by FEMA. I did confirm at those meetings that a representative from the governor's office had directed the Department of Building and General Services that oversees this to go ahead and remove the silt. And he also said that the 25% match we got won't come out of your budget. And it didn't happen for whatever reason. And since then, the farmer has told it all up. And so it's really impossible to tell what's new. And so there's not a viable FEMA project, which is a real shame because there was some ability to at least regrade the field, get rid of some silt, get it back to where it was pre-flood, and now that's gone. I can tell you exactly what that would have done in terms of flood impact for the neighborhoods, but it certainly is not nothing. We did have our hydrologist look at this using some older data he has, and his determination is that if we can regrade the field a bit, there's a mound in the center of the parcel that I think the pretty well-known Gordon Miller drone photo the last flood showed it as elevated. Essentially, what he determined is that mound can be moved to fill in some of the swales along Randall. That gives us at a minimum several inches of flood relief in the immediate area and perhaps a foot. I think anything from several inches to a foot is pretty meaningful. And his modeling suggested that went upstream about 7,000 feet. So essentially that will capture all of South Main Street too and give some flood relief for the entire area. So I think that's important. I have talked to Public Works and we're going to get some, we're going to have some basic testing done for the soil, environmental sampling. We're hopeful that it won't reveal anything because it's been agricultural for as long as anyone can remember. We're also going to take some core samples to see what is underneath all this. Perhaps there's some usable material for the town or some other partner in the future. The hydrology study that was done, the pinch point study we talked about often, did envision lowering about 15 acres of this parcel. And I still think that's a viable project, which is a flood relief, but I want to caution everyone that lowering 15 acres of land a few feet is thousands upon thousands of yards of fill that needs to go somewhere. Even if it's clean fill, it's a real challenge. So this is not an easy project to accomplish, even if it is town ownership, in town ownership. But I do think town ownership is important because as we've seen, after Irene, the state took some measures to protect its own complex, but they really didn't extend that further down into this parcel, which would protect South Main Street, Randall, and that entire area. The FEMA opportunity over the last couple of years has been lost. And so I think from the town's perspective, if we own it, despite all the challenges of doing a capital project, it's clearly a priority to the folks of this town. And so I think we're better positioned to make something happen, if nothing else, to simply ensure that there's another flood and there's additional deposits that we can work with FEMA and get that removed. So at least we can not go a little bit further backwards. We have in the past couple of years. So I think that's a good and important development. And I think there's a real good chance this will pass this session. One other announcement I want to make is we've been seeking a natural disaster preparedness coordinator for some time. That's a position that has been advertised, it's budgeted, and the short version of that position is I like to use the fire chief analogy. This position is the fire chief for floods, and so the job of our fire chief is not to respond to every fire, but it's to ensure that we have trained volunteers who can respond and to ensure that they have the appropriate equipment to make a difference. And that's how we envision this position. Not necessarily to respond to every flood, because everyone's got a personal life, everyone sometimes leaves the area. But to develop a crew of core volunteers who are there when there's a flood, and you can direct them, you can direct the cleanup effort. And to ensure those folks have the resources they need to succeed. And so it's not 1,000% formalized, but it's 99.99% there, but I've agreed with Danny Kelman to take the lead in that position. And I think that's a great fit, because Danny has been through this with the town before. So I think having that boots in the ground experience, and many folks remember that the first one, especially Danny, I think lived in the steel room with Alyssa and a number of others for about a week. So I'm glad that there's now someone who can take charge of that role and take the lead. And I think we're gonna make some good strides there. The other piece just related to flood resilience, since this has been a topic of late with the volatile weather we've had, is that we've now got we're now approaching a couple thousand people involved in our text line go system. So the event we need to use that to reach out. We've got, I think, a pretty good segment of the population that we can reach, and it's a pretty darn easy system to use. We try to be a little careful with it because every time there's some risk, we don't want to necessarily be the boy of pride wolf each time. But at the same time, we've got people enrolled, it's ready to go, should it be needed. It's a great way to really quickly push messages out to the entire community. In addition to things like Vermont Alert, in addition to things like Facebook, but it's our own tool, real simple sign up, real simple to read a text. You need to submit some.
I got it, teamwork.
Okay. So I think that's the basics of my update. Sorry, one other critical piece I wanted to mention about the cornfield. Well, two others really. The first is Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission is essentially in charge of the phosphorus reduction goals for the region. And now that's part of the broader conversation about phosphorus impacting Lake Champlain. And a fair amount of phosphorus comes from riverfront agriculture and some legacy agriculture. And Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission has looked at this, has looked at their broader regional goals and looked at this parcel and essentially said that there's an array of projects, there's dozens of projects that they could take on to accomplish their phosphorus reduction goals for the region. But essentially they can meet their goals in one project, and that's this project, because we've got a large parcel of land with phosphorus laden silt. And so that's interesting and useful because that opens up not just disaster relief funding to perhaps do a capital project here, but clean water funding. So we can approach this from a couple of perspectives and we can hopefully be competitive for a couple of different grant funding sources. And so exploring a partnership with them is I think a good opportunity for the town. And the final piece I want to talk about is we've been working with a natural resources management class at the University of Vermont. It's a junior and senior level underground, undergraduate course, not underground. And those folks are they're in the midst of a study driven by their professor with input from the town about some options for this cornfield, and so they're, now they're essentially giving us some research and some desk review about what options we have here. And that's things like leaving agricultural, that's things like, working to perhaps develop and make this more of a natural wetland system, and does that have any flood storage capacity? So they will complete their work essentially over the month of April, and then they would like to come to present to the select board at a future meeting, perhaps the end of April or early May.
Questions from the board on any of Tom's updates? On the property transfer, Tom, could you just give the two timelines in terms of when we'll know this session and what actual acquisition timeline would hypothetically look like?
So we will know by June 30th is when the session ends. The other piece is the draft bill gives the Department of Building and General Services some time. They've got to conduct a survey, we've got to formalize the actual parcel they want to transfer. And so, you know, that being said, there's no money involved here, which makes it easier. They don't need to determine fair market value. So I'm hopeful it can happen by the end of the year. At the same time, we can do our soil sampling simultaneously. And if we find out that this is a site that has some significant environmental challenges, then there's no obligation for the town to take ownership.
Roger,
Did the Department of Buildings and General Services indicate if they're going to renew the farmer's lease for the coming growing season?
The lease ends at the end of 2026, and so the draft bill gives some consideration. Essentially requires us to have a conversation with the farmer and give the farmer notification, which they would do with any lease. There is about 40 tillable acres there, to my knowledge. The other piece related to the farmer is we've Public Works Director who knows the farmer has reached out, and our utility district down at the wastewater plant has about 17 tillable acres, and so we may seek to engage in a contract there related to that land. So in the end, the farmer, first off, the farmer might not lose this in the end, because whatever we do, if we lower the land, for example, it might be more risky, it might flood more often, but it doesn't mean it's unavailable. And it certainly doesn't mean all of it is unavailable, and so I'm not sure the farmer in the short term is gonna really suffer any loss per se. I think it's gonna take some years to advance a project. And then I also think the E-Fed land a little bit down river is not super far, so there might have some interest in there. But essentially, yeah, we're already in conversation with the farmer.
We touched on this a little bit, but do we know what the potential is for heavy metals, hazardous materials having been deposited all the time in that parcel? Because I know, as you kind of mentioned, that could be a real significant, reason why we might not take over that portion.
Yeah, not yet, but we will before we take ownership. And there may be, I think at the worst case scenario, certainly that could scuttle the project. If there are some real challenges there, because any project would involve moving soils, which obviously is contaminated soil, is not real concern, but we're hopeful we're not going to run into anything substantial, given this has been agricultural for a long time.
That information we'd be getting from hydrologists and stuff, this study.
I'm not sure if his firm would do the soil sampling, but there's a number of local firms that will do it.
Any other questions on this? Thank you. I'll go Al and then Lisa. Do you mind coming up? I'm so sorry. This thing probably didn't get recorded online and now I feel guilty about it. I know, because it's good commentary and now it won't be.
Al Lewis, I watched the video live stream of the hearing. Tom, Bill Shuffler, Scott Mackey was there, Teresa was there. I want to say they did an excellent, I thought they did an excellent job. They have the Waterbury for certain case. What I want to ask is a question, with the flood pictures that are shown. The spot where the stack is, the smoke stack, which I'm sure is a historical preservation type thing, stands out like a sore thumb, like an island. And that's a cross section of the river. That's basically, because that's high, that also affects the cross section of the river. I'd like to encourage you to have some discussion at some point, maybe after this transfer, but because that appears to me is also, a possibility for elevating water to some small extent, but an extent upstream, if that's an encroachment. And if everything's going to be lowered to the level roughly of what the state did on the other side, on the south side and the east side of that smokestack, then it's even going to stand out more like a sore thumb. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. Lisa, you're next.
I got archaeology, was my only question, just one word.
The question is archaeology. Tom, do you have any response to archaeology question mark?
Yeah, part of the broader review we do before taking ownership, yeah, so I mentioned the environmental review, so that's all part of the.
Any other updates on this or questions? We'll plan to continue to have that on our agenda as there are pertinent updates moving forward. All right, that brings us to our next item, which is to finalize and re-adopt municipal ethics and conflict of interest policies. I will say in advance, this may be viewing editing in real time, so I'll ask for everyone's patience. If you want to stop sharing, I'm not sure what the best approach is. So one, I want to say offhand, so we have both municipal ethics and conflict of interest policies that were in place upon reviewing them, because we have the new one that was required from the state. We had the previous one that was on the books for the town. We wanted to revisit it at this meeting.
And Alyssa, if you'd like, I've got Tori's
That's what I'm wondering.
email of today on the website.
Perfect. And our incredible select board member, Tori, took it upon herself to look at these two documents and say, might we be able to have one clear, cohesive, combined document that we all could adopt together? And went ahead and prepared this, which Tom also reviewed.
Yes, and I will say, I appreciated Tom's input and would like to go through, because I like a lot of the input, that he offered. So is there any way to show that?
I have the Word doc up, if that's better to track changes, so it's wild or just Tom.
Give it a shot. Editing in real time, right?
That's what I said. We're not editing by committee, which I would just immediately put a stop to, but we're editing in real time, and here we go. Tori, should I accept
Yeah, maybe
everything?
just do the simple markup look. 'Cause
Yeah,
That's
we
scary.
love
Can you
this.
make it larger?
Yeah. Again, thank you, everyone. We'll absolutely do all that. Sorry, we're in track changes, and I need to say simple markup. And then we need to have Zoom at like under 90%. Okay, and I do think I did my best to include Tom's follow-up comments and yours,
Right.
but let's.
Yeah,
talk
I
through
like that. Yeah, so authority, Article 1, we had an old statute. Tom helped me find the correct statute, so we subbed that in. Is the main change on that. Purpose I left alone, seemed great. Definitions. Took a lot of the definitions from the state recommended one, and also tried to merge powers in where appropriate. Tom had a good point. I don't know if you took it out of the one, but there was, or actually, sorry, there were a few that were not like referenced later on at all in the thing, so I do agree with them. We should take those out.
Which I think in definitions.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you wanna go to G, designated complaint recipient.
Yep.
So, let's see, Tom had proposed some language instead of having like that chunk of like 9 items. I don't know if you have it and what you're doing.
What happens when we work full time into this job? Whoop.
Yeah, so I like that, but I do wanna just add. I think the designated complaint recipient, respectfully, Tom should also include the chair of the select board. It should be just a CC, both of you guys get that. So I would just propose. Going into the front, the select board chair and municipal manager. Shall be the designated. Or, yeah, you could throw it in after that, whatever, just throw in and select board chair, after like municipal manager up there.
And select board chair.
Yeah. If you're okay with that added duty, I just think it's important to have that. And then. For the second sentence, in the event the municipal manager is the subject of the complaint or designated complaint recipient shall be the chair of the select board, I think it should be changed to in the event. The municipal manager or select board chair. Is the subject of the complaint. The designated complaint, the back, are you beginning to say the backup designated complaint recipient? Shall be the vice chair of the select board, so whoever's getting complained about gets subbed into the vice chair. Okay,
No, Microsoft Word is not like select board is one word.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm
I hate to
ignoring,
be a
I'm
stickler.
ignoring all.
yeah, that was the other thing is our old policy did have it as 2 words, but in all of the state statutes, it is 1 word,
Oh,
so.
thank you, now I have
I-
a point too.
It is going to be 1 word in our policies, I'm in my mind,
And here I thought it was the Tom Lights convention, but it's actually
No,
state
it is,
statute.
yeah, cause I saw the difference and I was like, hold on, let me look into this. A legal order was taken out, which I like that. Tom proposed for municipal officer, it might be N now. Yeah, scroll up a little bit. That huge list that we could probably cut it down to only include those people that are actually. Like. That Waterbury has, and take out people that Waterbury does not have. Which I'm fine with that, my only caveat is if we do ever add any of these people we are taking out, like mayor. We just need to like revise the policy when that time comes.
Yeah.
Which is fine. We should honestly just revise policies a lot.
More policy revision, not via share screen, but more often.
And I
Yeah.
You can go through that list.
You go through that.
Okay, brilliant. Also, some of these might need, and then retaliatory action was also, you can take that out, so it also is not, oh, you're already there. The next one is Article 5. B. Tom also proposed new language for that, which is a little bit more straightforward, says the same thing. Plainer language, which would be helpful for everybody reading this, because it's already.
Less awkward than the tiny rain road we did, that's so that I probably remember sitting with silent for 20 minutes, anyway. Direct conflict. Is this a program?
Yeah, so then, and then the other stuff, like that's the end of Tom's input into my requested revisions, once again, really appreciate that, so thank you. A lot of the stuff in the state one, I think just made it did expand the policy on the conflict of interest, it does make it more solid, in my opinion. it makes disclosure more necessary. It has kind of repercussions really clearly spelled out. I think whenever a state updates policy, I think it's important for us to update ours and kind of do our best to mirror. And I did keep, one of the things that our policy was unique in is it did have an expanded version of your relatives that could be counted as conflict of interest. So I did keep that in this proposed revisions for us.
Board members have copies prior to these edits. Do we want printed copies or are you comfortable with this live editing? I'm just, okay, I can print more if it was a desire, that's fine. Okay.
If you want the special red line version that looks really crazy and mess, I'm happy to email that out, but it is scary what they're going to do, not a simple markup.
Awesome. Thank you, Tori and Tom, for your editing. Do we have additional notes or discussions on this? Again, the goal being that we now would be in compliance.
Yeah, so another thing for us to consider, maybe not necessarily tonight, and we can have it in the backs of our heads, is that there's a request that some municipal officers would disclose what other affiliations they have annually and make that list a public document, just to have full disclosure, for the public on what could possibly be potential conflicts of interest for people. I don't know if you want to consider it.
My thought on that is that if it's known, we might be better in a meeting at just reminding each other about, you know, you're on that board, you might not want to vote on this. It's easy to forget, especially if it's 10 o'clock at night. And then there also might be a discussion about, you know, what's a conflict? An example I'll give is that Mike has recused himself from essentially, as I recall, a resolution last year related to wake boats at the reservoir, because he's on the board of the Friends of the Waterbury Reservoir. I don't view that as a conflict per se, because I think under this definition, if there's wake boats banned at the reservoir, you're not getting any special benefit from that.
What are you talking about? Fishing is gonna be so much better.
I agree with you, but I err on the side of caution. And to me, I don't think it's gonna be, a lot of times, it's not gonna be an issue. I think that people know that you have some relationship to whatever is probable, you know, even though it's not an appearance or something like that, you're disclosing that you have some sort of relationship to a group that I don't think there's a problem with that.
And to be fair, under the new conflict of interest, and it's the same in our old one, it would be a disclosure that if you hold an office in one of those organizations.
Right.
You know, just being a member wouldn't count as a conflict.
But even then, you probably should even disclose if you have a membership interest, not that it's something to accuse yourself. It's always good, better to say than not say.
Right, I wouldn't suggest that we, you know, if we decide to do that, I would not suggest we list out all of our relatives, that would be excessive. But I think, you know, maybe just like if we own a business or serve on board, maybe we could consider disclosing that. Project?
How extensive is this relative?
So, under Article 3, Section E1, that list is actually from our old policy.
And it's quite a bit more extensive than the state law.
It is.
And the state law says simply, immediate member of family or household or business associate.
Yeah, exactly.
Other
So it
questions?
does go out
But that's our own policy, that's not the state policy.
Right, that was from our
And that's,
policy.
and that's something we already signed, that's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah, so that's what's in
we're
place.
going farther than that.
I don't know if we
Place
could.
removed.
Yeah.
Mike?
The only thing it doesn't address, and I don't see a problem, I think it's someone. If they had a situation like someone, they're cohabitating, and I'm looking at, they're not kind of romantically, you know.
Like I have a roommate, it's fine.
Yeah.
Actually, so that's covered under the second sentence. It's a member of officers, immediate family or household outside of the member of the household. Because they're in the same house.
Yeah, I can see that.
Just got the National Transportation Survey together and we're considered a household, so.
We got along when we were driving to and from on Wednesday.
I would think, when in doubt, this close.
Yes, yeah, which is also, that was the, makes it extra clear language, on Article 5B, when in doubt, disclose.
If there's any doubt. Shall as a matter of practice, err towards disclosure. Any other questions or comments?
So, one final thing, and I didn't write this earlier, but I just wanna suggest this is something to consider. On page 4, it is the it's the beginning of the recusal section. And occasionally, in my career, I've seen debates, and I could see it happening in New York, so I don't see it clearly defined. Does recusal mean recusal from the vote or recusal from the conversation in its entirety?
Does it from the members, so.
Using from a member, yeah, it seems pretty cut and dry to me.
In what
It
way?
would be the
If you
top.
have a conflict, you probably shouldn't join the debate.
Thank you, sir. Suffice to know.
Do we want to add any clarifying language?
I mean, it's just, we have to agree to interpret it that way, I guess. We need to reflect that in the minutes.
Well, so, I mean, it goes on to say in section 2 that you recuse yourself from any decision making. Yeah. I mean, cannot, and in A, it says cannot participate in any way to act or influence a decision regarding the matter, so I feel like it's. I feel like it's clear. I appreciate the. Yeah, so selfishly, if you guys are all good with it, I move to adopt the revised municipal ethics and conflict of interest policy.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt the updated policy from Tori and Mike. Questions? I'm happy to take questions.
I'm just wondering, would you need to warn the revised version?
My understanding is we have on the agenda tonight that we were finalizing and we adopted these policies. We've made some minor changes to what we previously had. And we're adopting it effective upon adoption. I will say, I've received public comment erring towards wanting us to have a signed copy right away, even though in practice, what we had already on the books was still valid. So in terms of, if the board supports this, I don't see a reason to adopt it. We can re-adopt it if there's a technicality regarding due diligence.
I don't see where we're making any real significant changes to what the proposal was, so.
So, and to be fair, I know it's a lot of red on the sides, but. Anything added was from the state's ethics code, which we are required to adopt. I think it's great anyways.
It's been done before us, yes, so.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, if anybody complains about our ethics policies, their policies would supersede ours, so we're already subject to it. Thanks.
We have a motion and a second. When you state what it was?
I didn't catch who was the second.
Great, motion by Tori, second by Mike.
Oh. Thank you.
Further discussion or questions on this topic? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that housekeeping is completed. I did make the liberty of doing one we can sign, and again, if needed, happy to have this again on our agenda next Monday to reaffirm it. All right, that will bring us to our next item, which is to confirm locations to post public notices. This was on our previous select board agenda, and it was a total oversight in running the meeting that we just didn't address it and moved on. We already designated our paper of record, but the other thing that is in the list of things to do with the housekeeping is to note the physical locations for notices in town. We've had these for many years. It's been the Waterbury Post Office, Waterbury Center Post Office, town offices. Am I correct, Tom?
Yes.
So we could take a motion to reconfirm those. Again, in practice, we've continued posting at all of those locations, but it's just, again, one of those things we should revisit annually. I would say in practice, we've also, again, heard comments and have conversations around if there's additional and or better places to post, which we can continue. But as far as legal requirements, those would be the three that we've designated previously.
And if I may, I would love it if we could at some point, not have post offices as a legal place for posting, just because they close at 5 on a Friday. If we're trying to get things done, get an agenda put out, sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge. I think kiosk in Rusty Parker would be a great option for legal posting, but I don't have a good second option. Waterbury Center.
I mean, you can get to the work board.
Can you?
Yeah. It's just that you can't make mail packages, the counter's closed.
And I was there at 4:59 last Friday, so I wasn't sure if
Yeah, no.
I don't know the rhyme or reason, but I have certainly gone intending to drop off mail inside, at least to the Waterbury.
Oh,
post office.
I've definitely done it for the center. I'm like. Realized once I got inside, I was like, oh, I can't go farther and talk to anybody, but I could get to the front for it.
So hearing from Tom, some potential interest in a further creative solution. But do we have a motion for tonight?
I'm to reaffirm existing locations for public postings. Second.
Motion by Keane, second by Roger to keep our 3 public posting places, Waterbury Post Office, Waterbury Center Post Office, and municipal offices. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next on the agenda, we have review openings for municipal boards and commissions, process for appointments and select board liaison role. I think tonight is really just a conversation about process. Looking ahead to our next meeting on the second page of the agenda, you'll note that school board candidate interviews are listed. We had communicated previously to the superintendent that that would be the date. We have been informed there is multiple applicants, more than the amount of seats we have available, so noting that the first portion of our upcoming meeting will be dedicated to that. That was a separate process. They collected the letters of interest, and I assume one of us, as in me, Tom, or Karen, will receive that at some point prior to the meeting. But just to say there are multiple applicants, we will review them at the beginning of the next meeting. The next step is also to consider municipal boards and commissions. Karen was kind enough to send me a list of the vacancies. I will note that the positions listed here are, gotta make a giant again, sorry, friends. Oh, goodness, really nice. I would note that these vacancies are because folks' terms are up. So I'm noting, like Amy was here earlier, I noted that they in fact have a full conservation commission, but some folks may have had terms. I am so sorry. I love you both dearly. It's really hard for me to talk. Thanks. So some of the vacancies that are here might be because folks just need to re-up for another term. So part of the outreach process is going through that. When Danny Tillman was on the board, she helped create a standardized application process. So we would anticipate doing that in the past. Tom has agreed to be the recipient of those. So we would go through a process of, in the past, asking folks who are currently on those commissions if they want to serve again. And then also posting all of this publicly. So anyone who's interested in any of those boards or commissions can serve. We discussed doing interviews for these positions at our second meeting in April, as Tom will be away and the opportunity relatively time into it.
In addition to our current municipal boards and committees, I noted there's also some things we have to reappoint annually. Like Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission and others. I haven't done a full run through, but mostly just to preview for the board that there will be some other positions we could consider. Yeah, I don't think I have anything today other than to hear input from folks around, confirming Tom would be the new contact that we'll plan to advertise on the municipal website and Front Porch Forum, have folks apply using the form, and review them at the second meeting in April, but welcome input from others if there's questions, concerns, etc. Jane and then Mike.
So we're doing school board on the 7th. And school board candidates on the 7th, and then, yeah, next the second, everybody else.
I guess that's a proposal that I would offer. I think we had talked as a board about potentially if folks for other municipal boards and commissions were available at the first meeting. Starting the process then, so that is an option. I will say when talking with Karen, her impression was sometimes it's easier to have one final deadline. Get everyone at that deadline, consider them all at once, particularly as in the past, we've sometimes had cases of. We have a lot of people from this board, but not this board, and that those are sometimes easier all at once. So I would say that we had discussed both. School board is definitely set because we communicated to the superintendent. We have the ability to decide for the other, doing them all at one was Karen's recommendation from being involved in the one.
As you mentioned, maybe I misheard, but you mentioned posted on Front Porch Forum, not whatever around the website. Didn't hear that.
No, I didn't say that specifically in it. I said on the town website and Front Porch Forum, but certainly we would love to send it to the roundabout or anywhere else we can share it.
Very appropriate.
Thanks, Mike. Other questions or comments? Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard correctly. So in terms of, we do have some 2025 folks, their terms are up. We have, I think the majority are interested in staying. Were you talking about a process for that? I thought I heard you say that you would either ask them or they need to send a signal, or could you just clarify what that would be for those that are interested in staying on, which would be different than someone vacating the position?
Correct. Yes, Amy. The process would be for those who have currently on a board with terms up this year. We would email them asking if they were interested in continuing their role. We would still ask them to complete the application as a formality, but they would get an email just to those folks asking for update. I know this has already happened for the development review board and a couple others.
Thank you.
We smooshed a lot of things in here. Sorry, was that?
Hello?
Oh, yeah, Roger.
I'm just wondering if we should set a deadline for people to express their interest, maybe April 18th. Since we'll be deciding all of these on the 21st.
In August, some of these are really wild there for the minute. You're proposing Friday, April 18th as the deadline for application?
Yeah.
Work for the board? You say you had none, so we'll propose advertising over the deadline of April 18th. For review at the meeting, which is on the 25th. The last piece we had on here was select board liaison roles. I know we talked about this briefly at our last meeting. Mike, we would indicated interest in continuing conservation version and development review board. So we had said that in your absence. Tori, I don't know if you were able to confirm on planning commission. The minutes did say you were a definite yes, but I didn't want to give you an option.
No, you're good. I'll be planning in trees.
Planning and trees.
Oh, trees.
I'm excited for the trees.
I just got an email pertaining to it, so.
I mean, I've got like March from Rotary on it, it's starting board trees on kids.
You will be shocked at how much energy the tree board has.
And Roger was kind enough to give a sentence on the description. The role of the select board liaison is to advise and inform committees and commissions on municipal policy and intent, as well as update the select board on committee progress and arrange for presentations. Like the one we had tonight. Does that work for the board? I didn't put it in the formal email.
No, it sounds exactly like what we talked about last meeting.
Which you maybe said last meeting, Tim. I think it's in the minutes that we approved.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm just showing you the text on my phone. Yeah, we're governing in real time, folks. Any other questions? Right?
Do I have recreation?
Yes, was what we have. We can do a formal list at the next meeting. I did not have time for this one. Any other questions, comments, inquiries, objections to the process? Otherwise, we'll begin at the next meeting at 6:30 when Kane's running the meeting, because I'm probably gonna be late. Awesome.
Melissa,
Yes, sorry.
what liberty to, please give the number of applicants for this meeting?
I have not had a confirmation directly from the school board. I've heard both 4 and 5 as numbers. Those have both been from indirect sources.
Alyssa, if I can weigh in,
Yeah.
there are 5. No, it's right now in 2 open seats, so we are very excited that there's so much interest.
I maybe recall Tori as a former school board member at the last meeting being concerned we wouldn't have 2. So
No, that's good.
I don't know what you know, right?
No, it's a good board. Ashley Wood is the baker for the barn down in Waitsfield, and she brings snacks. It's not great
You
board.
bring your application, Chris? I've noticed state changes their attitude well. Not the one.
That's great. Did you have a hand on that?
I just want to say, my preference, select board member would definitely be that the school board members be elected by the voters directly. I'm honored to have the authority to do the selection along with my fellow select board members, but it's not ideal from my perspective. I'm just wondering, Tori, if you have any idea as to why, for the second year in a row, we had no candidates running in the open election, and now we have 5 people expressing interest in being appointed.
So for clarification, you see Lisa over there, I think we have 2 running in the open election.
Oh, we did?
Yes, Waterbury has 4 seats.
Okay, all right.
So we did get 2. I know one person is one person is a returning member who was considering it, but he was just on the fence and got peer pressured very effectively. And then another person was also a former member and did not believe they had time in their schedule and things have freed up for them. So I know those are like 2 people and those are their reasoning. But I do agree with you. I think it's a lot better when the voters can elect them. I think that's. I would encourage that. I would prefer that very much, but I'm glad that at least the school board will not be going months with an empty seats for Waterbury, so. I'll take what I can get for now, but I agree with you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, listen,
And Chris, yeah.
I'll make it quick.
So it seems how you are a former school board member,
But 2 minutes, not even.
I had this ridiculous idea that in order to get more public engagement, would it make sense and would it be feasible to perhaps the school board meet once a month,
School board meets every other week.
every other week, so
On
that was the
Wednesdays.
select one then, right? If instead of having it at Harwood, if, let's say, the Valley board members meet at the Reedfield School if possible. Moretown, Duxbury, Waterbury, possibly meet here. Engage with each other over Zoom. Would that encourage more community participation,
So I would,
resident, voter
Yeah.
participation? Cause I know that if the board meetings were here, I'd certainly come.
right, so from my personal opinion and experience, I think having all board members present together in one room is extremely instrumental to the discussions that go on there. I will say, when discussions about budget had been taking place over the past few years. The school board members make every effort they can to get out into their community. They were out at Waitsfield Farmers Markets on the weekends. We had several informational sessions throughout town, leading up to it. One was even at Black Cat Coffee. Several members come to these select board meetings ahead of budget talks to try and engage people. And you can always get it via Zoom as well if you cannot make it to Harwood. But I think having each of the representatives in one room is really instrumental to the discussions that happen. And especially because when there's division of like how some of the valleys people feel they are being treated by others, to divide them further, I don't think would be
Yeah, my intention
Right.
wasn't for that, obviously.
right. I didn't think it was, but I just think that might be an unintended feeling that could come up.
I appreciate both of you. I'm gonna go ahead and reclaim the select board meeting since Tori's in a new and different elected office, and we have other boards that can hear those concerns and ideas, but thank you. We appreciate you raising them and responding. Any other items on Waterbury Municipal or municipal because no one ran, boards and commissions? All right, I'll move us on to the, Kane, go ahead.
No, I was just
We
gonna, I
have
noticed,
2
I noticed your list.
Yep.
And I guess notably speaking from natural disaster, there are 2 vacancies currently without the renewal vacancies. And so it just said 2, and I was like, I'm pretty sure somebody.
I think Karen actually sent me an email after with that point, and I will name another piece
So,
of housekeeping is term limits for all of these.
Right, then I just don't know how many are corrected here.
Heard, need to review that. And I will note that was one in particular where what terms folks were appointed to was also a question, so that might be part of our housekeeping as we bring new folks on, making sure they're for the specific staggered terms. All right, 9:05, Duxbury and Moortown Fire Protection Contracts. I will turn it over to Tom. I believe we both are posted online.
Yes, let me, start with Moortown, because it's the easy one. The town fire department covers just a small sliver of Moortown, and that contract for the last several years has simply been inflationary, so it's we take the rate of inflation and apply that to Moortown. And it's a small amount. That's before their board at their next meeting, if not tonight. Last year's was a little bit less, I think the inflation was 3.5%, something like that. A fairly simple matter. For a long time, there was no contract, it was just a set dollar amount that was agreed to. And at some point, a couple of years ago, I decided to take some of the Duxbury language and just formalize it. Duxbury is different. Duxbury is a change, and not a giant one, but it being substantial over the long term. So the old agreement had language about Duxbury's grand list and Waterbury's grand list. And so essentially, we calculated the cost based on our fire department's expenses in the prior year. And then we looked at our grand list, adjusted the education grand list, we had the appropriate adjustments in there. And we covered a certain percentage of their grand list. And then the final analysis, it worked out to be about 15% of the fire department's budget was covered by Duxbury. But what's been happening, and it's a tiny bit each year, but it adds up, is that our grand list is growing faster than theirs. And so that percentage that they pay us at a part-home budget goes down a 0.1% a year, 0.05, 0.10 every year. It's a little bit. And it's nothing in a year, but over a decade, it suddenly is, again, not huge, but it's a few percent of the fire department budget that they don't pay us for, but it's a few percent of a budget at $800,000. So over time, there's this little creep. I think the agreement worked great for a long time, but now it's, again, very, very slowly moving a little more in their favor. And so I had emailed and talked to Dick Charland, who was a select board chair, and I said, I think it makes sense to simply tie this contract do something different, because our costs don't go down just because you're paying a little less for it. So in the current year, I suggested to him that we keep the exact same dollar amount as last year. Which turns out to be a little better for us than it would have been using the old methodology, and in the future. What I suggest in the contract with Duxbury is that we tie it to. Our tax rate, so if our tax rate goes up 3%, that the fire contract would go up 3%, and then he thought that was logical. So I think that made sense in general for both parties, and I think that is a fair way to tie it together. The other complexity we would have under the old agreement is the fire department budget. Gets a little bit odd and bumpy when you buy vehicles, especially when you buy vehicles with the local option tax. It also gets odd and bumpy when you retire debt. And so my prior conversations with Duxbury have been, well, we retired debt in 2024. That was still an expense to us, so you still should pay your respective share. But that debt we retired in 2024 was for future years, so I think it's fair to incorporate it into future years. Or you can pay it all at once, and at some point you're doing calculus when you don't need to. So the final contract for Duxbury is 127,560. The adopted budget had 125, so we're good to the budget, and I think it's a fair agreement for both parties.
Well, do elaborate a little bit more on that, kind of a little bit of it went over my head there as
Sure.
so pay off the debt.
So the older versions of the contract, we covered about 83% of their grand list. And so we simply took their grand list each year and took 83% of it and took our grand list and used that ratio, which was in the range of 14-15%. So that 14-15%, we multiplied that by the fire department's total expenses, and that was the bill. And
I understand all that, I'm just in terms of paying off the debt and paying off the truck.
And so late last year, the town used local option taxes to pay some debt. I don't recall off the top of my head how much that was fired, but that was a good amount, and that was debt that we would have otherwise paid in 2025 and 2026.
Right.
And so had we continued on the old model, we would have had to figure that out. So it would have been Duxbury, we had a big expense in 2024. You can simply pay us that percentage, but then your budget takes a big hit. Or we can pay it as if it was budgeted, planned for originally. But it was also fair to say to them, Duxbury, we've paid this off, there's no interest. We can't bill you for interest we didn't pay. At some point, it just gets a little difficult, and at some point, it's easier to just say, how about a flat fee?
So moving forward. Now that the debt of the buildings are paid off. Are they still gonna be responsible for part of the maintenance costs and all that moving forward?
Yeah, they're still responsible. The way I think of it is, fire department budget is about $800,000. That includes all our debt. They're paying a little over 125, so they're paying 1/8 of our budget, about 12.5%. I think that's a pretty fair deal for Waterbury. So the numbers don't change greatly, but the methodology just changes a little bit, and I think. I think again, our grand list is growing faster than theirs. I think not a big deal in any one year, but over time it can add up.
Questions from the board, Mike?
Tom, are you getting any pushback from either Moretown or Duxbury on the solar issue?
No, there was, my understanding is. Before my time, there was some pushback from Duxbury, and there was a Duxbury members of the select board that suggested, why don't we just not pay Waterbury? We've got these mutual aid agreements, they have to respond anyway. And Gary Dillon's response to that was, no, that's not mutual aid, that's automatic aid. And that's a whole different beast. Years ago, there was also some chatter about having a payment per call. But then I think for both municipalities, it's pretty tough to budget. But it's been pretty quiet. My conversations again with Dick Charland, who's not on the board anymore, but he always indicated to me he didn't think the price was outrageous, certainly far cheaper than them starting their own department, having their own equipment. And I think from our perspective, it's not a tremendous call volume, so I think the payment we get is fair.
We haven't had enough like wildfires quite yet.
Not today for sure.
We know we would bill separate at the
Yeah.
rate allowed by state statute. Other questions for Tom on this? And Tom, just to be clear, you outlined this new methodology that's not included in this language per se, we're just approving the contract for that ensuing year. Other questions from the board? If not, we would be looking for a motion on the Moretown contract and the Duxbury contract.
They move to approve the Duxbury Moretown Fire Protection Contract.
Second.
Motion to approve both contracts and a second. Is the board okay with voting on this package? All right, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Would someone like to designate their copies to be signed? I guess I can do it and pass them around. And Tom, if you would witness.
Actually, let's get 2 signed copies, so we can keep a fully signed one,
Mike, you wanna start your copy? And then we'll pass them along, and then we will move to our next item. Tom, if you want us to bring, so our next item is municipal communications position. I've acknowledged this may have not been the most well worded agenda item, but it's a general conversation with regards to municipal communications and outreach, which we've heard later today. And I'll turn it over to Tom to talk about.
Yep, and Amy Marshall Carney, when she gave her presentation, gave a great reference to this, because she mentioned the challenges and sometimes getting all this information out to the public. So we've had a number of internal conversations about hiring an individual to essentially help us get our information to the public, and that is a combination of work done by staff and work done by boards. And the thought would be to have a well-written monthly newsletter would be useful for the public. And I think Conservation Committee is a great example of that, because Amy and the committee, to their credit, I think have taken a more active role than prior conservation commissions have in recently since I've been here. There's also an awful lot of good work going on in other committees, and the rec committee, for example, is embarking on a facility study with staff, and that was approved in the budget. And so the thought has been to hire an individual on essentially a stipend basis to pull all these disparate threads together and get that information out to the public, because there's an awful lot going on, and to otherwise write it from a staff perspective means you don't do much else. I tried writing newsletters for a little bit. It just takes an inordinate amount of time. I know in the past, Bill Sheplock was asked by the Selectboard to sort of do the same and do updates, and it just takes an awful lot of time to get this done. So having some dedicated help, I think, would be extraordinarily useful. Again, I envision it as essentially a monthly sit-down phone call with department heads to say, let's go over the major things you've done this month, but then also take the same process with the committee chairs and call committees and say, what are the major things? And maybe in a particular month, there's not a whole lot going on in natural disaster, but there's a lot going on in conservation. And I think just pulling these threads together would be really useful for all of us, and just getting the word out about all the various things going on, because I think we keep hearing at this board that that's one of our challenges, and I think it's been a challenge for a long time, and I think I cannot fix it without some additional resources, and so that's the thought process behind it.
Questions or comments from folks on the board? Tom, do you have a sense of the general scale of magnitude of resources you anticipate this would take?
I think the intent is, from the perspective of staff, that it wouldn't be that much work, because it's more of an interview. And perhaps some help editing the newsletter of someone, but I think staff can provide the themes and the story to the person doing the writing. I think that person can pull everything together. I think the same goes for committee chairs. It wouldn't be that much work for them and more just be, hey, here's what we did, here's the materials from the minutes, here's what's new and exciting, here's what we need to get out to the public. And from our perspective, here's the help we can give those committees to get the information out.
I meant more directly, you mentioned a monthly stipend, and is that something, as far as I'm aware, we didn't build it in the budget, so you have a proposed resource for, or how much would you anticipate that type of role?
Have an individual, anticipate $500 a month.
Other questions or discussion from the board? Roger?
I'll move to reauthorize this new position. As described.
Second. Okay, motion by Roger, second by Tori, to authorize the municipal manager to hire someone for a stipend of $500 a month to help with the town of Waterbury news office. Is there any further discussion?
I had a question from the public, Valerie Rogers. So I think you do have, I'm sorry, I couldn't raise my hand, so sorry.
Yeah, Mike just raised his hand and I'll get you right after. Thanks, Valerie. Mike, go ahead.
I'm just curious how that fee relates to some of the other positions we've been on. I know we seem to have a little bit of a creep on, positions. And how does
So we have a natural disaster position that's hiring. We had some money in the budget to hire a contractor to help us with some flood related grant seeking and some of that work. This is in addition to that. You can make your own judgment about $500 a month and whether or not that's a good investment. I increasingly have the sense that maybe in the future there is a combination.
Yeah.
Now there's an old joke around that I've heard around the office that and Bill can elaborate that when Barb Farr was here, she was kind of the default deputy town manager because she did a million little things for Bill. And I never met Barb Farr, but I sure probably wouldn't mind having her next to me to assist in some of these things.
I would agree with that.
And so I again, I increasingly feel like there are these little buckets of work that add up and they're hard to get to in the context of I don't want to say normal work week because I don't ever anticipate having normal work weeks, but they're simply hard to get to. And so, yeah, I do think openly about is there some way to kind of combine this into one at some point.
Would this be a municipal employee with full benefits?
Yeah, no, this is just a stipend for it. And
It's a stipend.
maybe contractor.
Just curious, I guess we seem to be hiring a lot of these little roles that have formally been volunteer, and I know it's hard to get a good communication person, for free.
Other question from Kane, is there you? Oh, and I know Valerie was nice, but Kane's like going to.
To ask for the conservatives in the room, how do we land on $500 a month?
Negotiated.
So there is an individual in mind.
I'm gonna go to Valerie and then I'll go to Sandy. Valerie, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think that earlier I heard that the way we were going to disperse information was with the Front Porch Forum and the Waterbury Roundabout. And we could easily do that with our meeting minutes for every board or committee we have. I'm not sure we do that, but I think that's what you're talking about doing. So I'm not sure what this person could do more than that? And why do we have to pay someone to just put a link out there on the communication boards that you all just agreed were the best, which were, I think, Front Porch Forum and the Waterbury Record? So I'm not sure why we need this person. Why do we need to pay anybody to do what anyone could do? Post a link on either one of these boards. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. I'll let Tom respond. I think some of the conversation we heard was around interviewing folks and synthesizing info. I would say, speaking for myself, one, I think it's a point really well taken. As someone who I will say took 8 hours of vacation this Friday to exclusively attend Waterbury municipal meetings, it takes an enormous amount of time and energy to put together as basic as this agenda and the material for this meeting, including the full-time municipal manager's salary, my volunteer vacation time, the volunteer work of this select board. So I guess I'll say that on the record. That's why we're doing editing live in front of everyone, because I spend a lot of hours on this and it's still never enough. But I'll let Tom speak to this position and the scope of work.
So it's a great point, Valerie. What I've heard from a number of people who I think we see regularly at these meetings is that it's really hard to keep up because we've got how many committees? 9 or 10 committees. They're all meeting monthly, if not more. And so it's not posting meeting minutes. This is about a newsletter that goes out and I think synthesizes all that work and highlights the work that's most meaningful.
And then Bill, do you mind coming up? Just sorry, thank you.
I just had a question. Is this person already hired, or is it going out for advertising, like it's being advertised as a position that's opening up?
Yeah, great question. I don't know. That was a question I had myself. The motion on the table. Good.
I think that, Tom mentioned both the fire and the boards. So after one of the boards, multiple boards evaluations of me, they asked me to write the town manager's report. And, there were select board, it was before he funded, so there was the trustees and there was the water sewer commissioners. And, they both, the select board and the trustees met 2 times a month, and the water sewer commissioners met once a month. And, ultimately I came back to them and said, I'm spending 10 hours a week writing this report. And there's a lot of information in it, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm not even getting into it. But I can't afford to do any more than 10 hours a week, and frankly, I'm not sure that this is a great use of my time. I think that minutes are one thing. I think that getting information to the community about what's going on in the Conservation Commission and in the, the free community, a lot of the report about how I enjoy those people. So I think that there are plenty of reasons why you should consider doing something like this. It's communicating about what's going on in this community. And I don't think you have any staff members, whether it's Tom or the town clerk or anybody else, that has enough time to do what I think they're asking or what I'm suggesting. So I think this is a good idea. All the other questions about how much it costs and whether it's going to be advertised, that's for somebody else to do. And the thing about fire, it was great to have. It was also great to have about 85% of the salary.
Billy, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Well, both in the community survey we did and in the visioning sessions, we're hearing a lot about the inability to hear from the select board. So I think it's a good idea. Yeah, you can roll your eyes, but we hear that a lot. And so, I think the idea of trying to find another way to get information out to the community. I would also say that given I was on the Conservation and the Planning Commission, I think minutes are not a very user-friendly. They're more legalistic, discuss this, discuss that, but I'm not really sure people can go through that and really learn much. So I do think it's a good idea to find a different way to communicate the two people. But I don't know that a full-time position is, I would say experiment with different models. Try to figure out what would work and then how much it would cost before we go off and just hire someone, which I assume at some point would be an entrenched position that we would never change. So I would think about trying to just experiment a bit.
Thanks, Billy. Other comments on this? Oh, sorry, Roger, it's right in front of the notes. Yeah.
No, the reason I moved it is that I, over the past 2 years of being chair, I've been able to watch Tom in action. Met with him most Fridays to go over a variety of different issues and set the agenda for the following select board meeting. And I agree with Billy that it is a challenge to keep everyone informed what we're doing, and even beyond that, what he's doing with EFA as well as with the town municipality. So I think that this is a worthy investment, and this is a stipend. It is not committing to a position. If it doesn't work out, we can terminate the arrangement. I support it. I think it definitely will help resolve some of this issue about community engagement.
I have my pros and cons on this position. A lot has to do with, you look at a lot of people in different committees are giving a lot of their time. You look at just what the select board people who are being paid. I'm not asking for a raise. I don't want a raise. I don't want to, but I see this as all part of a little bit of creep on expenses. And I'm just a little concerned, if we have I'm not saying this position is not worthwhile, but I don't know if there's kind of a better way to do that. If we had someone in the community that's willing to donate some of their time, I know you may have had conversations and that's what the person will do, but it's like, I tell my mother-in-law that always saying, oh, you paid for that town job. Yeah, I probably get about 25 cents an hour. And there's a lot of truth to that. I don't even know if it's 25 cents an hour. And I'm just concerned about, not that I don't think I think it's very important to get the word out. But can we not do it in a different way? So I'm a little concerned.
Other comments? I'll say, taking off my hat as chair, thank you, I'll get to you in a minute, Lisa. Speaking for myself, if you didn't catch on passionately from my 8-hour soliloquy, I think the communication is really needed. I think my question to the board would just be around the process. I think your point around many small positions and at what point it makes sense to have one full-time human is well taken by me. In terms of instead of going to a lot of different people, I think personally having paid staff capacity is really important to have consistency and accountability and someone willing to devote the amount of time. I'd be curious about advertising or having a more formal process, and or just what feels like the best approach on it. Given that we don't have a description of it and what I was like, someone emailed me about this item and I said, it's a preliminary discussion. I'm not going to overrule the board. Personally, I didn't know that we'd be making a definitive motion tonight, but that's okay. Sometimes we look at Kane and then Lisa.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that I was a little nervous that we're seeing this agenda item for the first time and we've already got some more time to negotiate with. I would say I'd be more comfortable with this if we hired for the role. Like put out an ad, if they interview candidates.
Because negotiating for 500 one person. Doesn't fill me with a whole lot of confidence. Probably get better bang for your buck. Especially if it's a once monthly. Newsletter. So I definitely feel more comfortable obtaining the creation of this position if we intended to interview multiple candidates.
Lisa? Thank you so much.
I would agree with what you just said too. I think that it would be nice to put something out there if we are going to do this so that anybody can apply for it. I also think $6,000 a year is a lot. And I would prefer to see something that's maybe quarterly as opposed to, I think it'd be less burdensome, but be just as effective. We're having a difficult time getting people engaged. But it's hard enough to get people to sit down and read even once a month. Something that's going on maybe once a quarter would be adequate. And since we do have people on a number of committees, it seems like taking, 5 hours a month or something for them to come up with, even if you had a questionnaire that made it simple for whoever is doing this. Just however you want to break the questionnaire down, ask 5 questions that somebody simply answers, because it is a lot more difficult. I've done newsletters before, and they do take a lot of time. But if you just simply had 5 questions you're asking of whatever committee member, that might be an easy way to compile the information. So basically, I think we just need to be a little more creative about it as opposed to the creep that does happen in the that sentence.
So now we still have a motion on the table.
I don't want they don't want to say this is important. And we have WDEV. So what if once a quarter, we had like our town manager or even our chairperson here that did a little interview on WDEV or something, utilize that incredible resource that we have.
The only time I've ever done it is when we were in the middle of flood response in 2023, so would love a rosier occasion. We had a motion by Roger, second by Tori, to authorize the municipal manager to create this newsletter position for $500 a month. That's on the table. Do we have further discussion or amendments on that, or should we put it to a vote? I will name, we've had in conversations and discussion about advertising it. I don't know if that's a formal.
I would like to amend to do a formal interview process.
Great, so motion to amend the motion, wow, this feels like town meeting, to advertise the process.
And I would concur with Amy's amendment, but also not specify $500 night.
If I may suggest an amended motion to create a communications position and give the town manager permission to advertise and interview candidates for a maximum amount of $500. That encompasses everything.
So, yeah, do you want to withdraw yours and go with Tori's?
I'll go with Tori's.
Right, so Tori's made a motion. Do you want to second it?
Yes.
Is that amenable to other board members? So motion to authorize the municipal manager to create and advertise a position for the newsletter communications scope of work we just reviewed for up to $500 and advertise it. Further discussion on this. Right, all those in favor, please say, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm gonna leave this thing alone, but it's tough. We're talking $500 here. Tom's time, I'm sure, it's well over that. He could probably earn that $500 back every month. But to everybody else's point, I think people are so concerned about cost of living and whatnot. It seems like another $500 is just creeping bureaucracy. So I think 500 is a good place to start. I'd hate to see it go to 5,000, certainly. But if we can find somebody in that range, $500, if not, revert back to your normal or your original, idea and go from there.
And I guess just Mike asked about this and you hinted on it, but I think this is a gap we have that I think can be improved. The other big challenge I think we have now that I feel is, when Steve Wattsbeach was here, he was a very, very prolific grant writer. And he wrote a lot of grants, he knew the process, he knew all the little, he knew them all, and having the help I have on the flood side, gets me some capacity there that's really useful, but I feel like, I've come to grips that I think we're still struggling with Steve's loss, and I didn't, Steve and I only overlapped for a short time. But I've noticed that it's been really helpful, and that's just an area where I feel like, been a bit of a struggle to keep up with some of the grants, and I think we're going after them. Municipal planning grant was submitted today. The Better Connections grant was recently submitted. Better Connections was essentially written by Katie Gallagher and Mickey McDougal. But I feel like there's some opportunities out there that we're just not in the hunt for, and how we get a little more in that field, and that game is something I'm still trying to get to work on.
Sounds like a great future agenda item, so I'm gonna make that Tom's note. We have a motion on the table. This is a comment on the motion.
As a comment on Tom's. I do think it's way more important to have the municipal manager chasing after municipal grants and things like that. And not saying that this is not an important position. We just never know who's gonna come out of the woodwork saying, I would be glad to volunteer to do that, or for a minimal, stipend. And maybe people think this is a minimal stipend. I just get concerned about how many of these positions we're gonna create. It's getting to the point where no longer people volunteer, so all have to be paid. And I know everyone's busy and it's tough to do things, people are busy, but I would much rather, I don't think Tom's time is well spent doing this task. I think writing grants and things like that, or having directing staff to do that is much more important. But I'm just worried about throwing money out for every little thing.
All right, my fortitude to keep us on time has waned as I'm in our 3.5 of municipal meetings.
Can I just confirm who seconded Tori's motion?
Roger.
I did.
Roger, okay, thank you.
Do we have any last comments?
Sorry. Just a quick one. Are you just talking about a newsletter like on the website, or are you talking about mailing out something or creating something actually in paper?
I wasn't thinking of mailing it out formally, because there's a big cost of that, but work with Lisa if we can, website, front porch forum, all those places to get it out there.
All right. Motion from Tori, second by Roger. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We've authorized creating and advertising the position, Tom, for up to $500, and we're looking forward to future updates. Thank you. All right, next up, we have select board and manager informational updates. Again, things that were not on the agenda, just sharing information, things that need more discussion will go on a future agenda. I think I already said mine, which is that the planning commission has a visioning session at the Grange on Wednesday, April 2nd, 6 to 8 p.m. That is all I have to share. Mike, anything new?
Nothing, I'm looking forward. I haven't been to a conservation commission meeting for a while. I plan on going to their next meeting next week. Select board meeting, hopefully. Actually, not one of their concerns and stuff like that. PRP sort of. They operate on their own thing. There's not a lot that, they're pretty good and self-reliant.
Thanks. Jane?
Natural disaster is very excited to work with you here. We're there. That's my update. They're just ecstatic.
Thank you. Roger?
I haven't had a chance to meet with rec committee, but I'm looking forward to it. Did want to mention that we called together a group of business owners in the Bidwell Lane area talk about the new transportation, downtown transportation grant and the revitalization of that whole area of the downtown. That was that's 2:00 on Friday, the 11th of April.
Thank you very much. Tori?
The tree board canceled their meeting, so that's.
Look forward to hearing. And Tom, other updates that haven't come up so far?
Yep, there was a meeting last week. My consultant for on the flood relief grant consultant was able to attend, and there is an excess of $50 million that the state has in community development block grant funding. A good chunk of that is dedicated towards some housing in Barry and Montpelier, but there's still a very large chunk of cash available, and some of that's dedicated to Washington County. So expect more on that in the future, but there's potentially some more grants available for the town. Despite the fact that this is community development block grant disaster relief funding, there's a focus on housing. So there's some potential funding opportunities there. Quick tree board announcement. Not tree board, but tree announcement. So 2 mature trees in our downtown were identified with emerald ash borer. One of them, the power company agreed to take down, which saves us about $4,000. We'll have to grind stumps at that point and replace that tree. The other one, we will take down at some point this year. Our tree budget in general is $8,000. One complex tree in the downtown community is about half that. 8,000 is actually a little bit of an increase over the past couple of years. So the chair of the tree committee is not unhappy with that amount, but we've had some conversations about emerald ash borer and we may have a board discussion about that in the future, but the real challenge is there's a tree inventory and we've got all the ash trees in our downtown identified, but there's an awful lot of them. Not all are big and complex takedown, but there's a lot, and I think it's safe to assume that it will spread as it has everywhere else. We can inoculate ash trees, and there's been some conversation about that. We've done a little bit of that in the past. The inoculations, to my knowledge, are highly effective, but to inoculate a tree is a couple $1,000s, and you have to do it every other year. So it's a very expensive proposition, and in all likelihood, just due to financial pressures, it may be that we simply take down the ash trees as they get infected, because I think other options are pretty expensive, but I'm sure there's more conversation about that. The final piece is I got appointed to the board of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, which I think is good for the town because it gives you some influence on that board work and some decision making in the league. And not only do they have, I think, a good, strong lobbying presence on our behalf, but they also provide all our insurance. The position comes with a stipend where they pay the individual $150 per meeting. I don't have to take it. In my contract for both the town and EFUD, I need board permission for outside employment, and in talking with council, one, he doesn't really consider this quite employment because it's a stipend to serve on a board, but I'm simply not going to take the stipend, so the stipend will come back to you. So what I paid for the couple months of new, which is more important than the little stipend for going to meetings.
Oh, go ahead.
But I think it's good to have some influence on that board, and I think it's helpful for the town.
It's a very generous offer that Tom is making to you to turn $150 back to the town. I would encourage you to keep stipend.
I just want the lunch.
If you're going to be an effective board member, as all of you have to prepare before the meetings, you have to go to the meetings, and he still has to get all the same work done here that he was doing before, and he's going to be doing something. And yeah, you can argue that, he's taking town time to go and do this, and the town should be reimbursed for it. The boards that I work for allowed me to keep the stipend, and I kept the stipend. There were times that when the LCT was challenged, I didn't take it. But I think that having Tom on that board is a benefit to the community. There's a lot of things that we did here that were first talked about. And Waterbury was an early adopter on many things, especially through the insurance program, because I got information on PLCT, brought it back here, we implemented it. And it's not a lot of money one way or the other. And I know you're just talking about $500 stipends for the communications director, but I would encourage not to make the offer and keep the money back. I would encourage the town to say we should.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Tom.
And I guess just what I'll say, I appreciate that, Bill, but something I've noticed in municipal government is that there was a real separation in terms of pay that was caused by COVID. And I think if employees hired pre-COVID sometimes got stuck at lower salaries, and employees hired post-COVID didn't. And I appreciate Bill saying that. But Bill was here a long time and I got hired pretty close to his salary. And I think if this board had, if I'd worked here and everything was back in time 5 years, the board would have been in a position where they would hire at probably 80 or 90% of Bill's salary and probably had a bunch of applicants. So I think I've benefited from that COVID boost just by virtue of the timing. And so I think it's having my salaries there. So I think giving it to the, it's not a lot of money, but I think giving it back is totally fine.
Well, I'll say by way of updates, congratulations, and I'm gonna encourage us to discuss this another night unless folks want to, go ahead.
Take the money, but besides that, how many emerald, how many ash trees do we have in our community? You know,
Well, in the downs. We've got a full inventory. I can pull it up for a future meeting.
Okay,
I don't care to speculate, but I think it's in excess of 60 mature trees, but don't quote that.
Okay. Just curious how much of the issue could
Do you need our authorization to accept this position?
Do you need our authorization to keep the stipend?
No conflict.
Right, any other updates? I'm gonna move us on to next meeting agenda. If you flip to page 2 of tonight's agenda, we already have
I'm
some.
so sorry, I missed something. Apparently Friday, April 18th, the tree board will be meeting for a roundtable discussion of the Emerald Ash Board. So if you want to know more, April 18th, or just wait for me to update you. Thanks. Yeah. Next meeting agenda.
Friday, April 18th for Emerald Ash Board. Yes, skipping down to the very bottom, our next meeting, which will be on April 7th, I should have emphasized again more clearly at 6:30 p.m. Items I'm aware for the agenda are school board candidate interviews, which we've talked about. Joe Camerata from the Housing Task Force has come up with a finalized proposal around the Housing Trust Fund money. So consideration both of that program and use of the fund generally for the agenda. Tom, you noted that you were asked for input around municipal government goals as part of the town plan update, and you wanted board input on that, so I have a placeholder on that. We have more events. So 2 pending event approvals, these are both much farther away, so we could bump them out if the agenda is getting crowded. I don't know if state police rebooking for that meeting is practicable, given that we'll have school board candidates, it might be hard. But
We have 5 school board candidates.
that's what.
Yeah, so. I'm sure Joe's presentation. Probably take about a half hour. Then town planning date. Another half hour, an hour for the school board. So 2-hour meetings, just call it.
I think this is doable.
Is there any other things folks want to add?
If we can get the police lieutenant or captain, that would be helpful, yes.
We'll work with what is drafted here, with the addition of state police as practical. Are there items on this? All right. Check on page 1, on page 2, we have 2 items for executive session, contracts and attorney-client communications. Both require a finding that premature general public knowledge, where we place the town of Waterbury at a disadvantage, we don't anticipate action after either item.
I move to find that premature public knowledge of contracts would place the town at substantial disadvantage.
Motion by Kane, second by Roger, doing all right, Cheryl? And just for contracts. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Do you want me to make the other one?
That'd be great.
I move to find that premature public knowledge of attorney-client communications will place the town at substantial disadvantage.
Second. Motion by Kane, second by Tori. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
I move to enter executive session.
Second.
Are you still?
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.